The moment Elena Brooks opened that door, she sealed her fate. What started as a simple dinner invitation became the spark that ignited a mafia boss's jealousy, and the confession that would shatter everything. A loyal house manager, a dangerous lieutenant, and the most powerful man in the city watching from the shadows. Tonight, lies will crack open, hearts will be exposed, and control will slip through the fingers of a man who never loses. Can love survive in a world built on power and secrets? If you're ready for a story where loyalty collides with desire, hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. Bote. The Moretti estate sat like a crown on the hill overlooking the city, all stone and iron and old money that didn't need to announce itself. Inside, the halls were silent in that particular way that expensive places get silent. Thick rugs, heavy drapes, the kind of quiet that swallowed sound before it could echo. Elena Brooks moved through those halls like she belonged to them, which, in a way, she did. 3 years as house manager had taught her every creak in the floorboards, every temperamental light switch, every room that Dominic Moretti actually used versus the ones that existed purely for show. She knew which coffee he preferred at 6 in the morning and which scotch he reached for when the night had gone badly. She knew the difference between his working silence and his thinking silence, between the footsteps that meant he was coming to find her and the ones that meant he was leaving. She knew too much, probably. It was nearly 10 when the doorbell rang, which was unusual. People didn't just show up at the Moretti estate. They were summoned, or they were expected, or they were turned away at the gate by men who smiled politely while their hands rested on concealed weapons. Elena set down the household ledger she'd been reviewing and smoothed her hands over her slacks. Not a uniform exactly, Dominic didn't require that, but she'd learned early on to dress in a way that communicated competence without calling attention to herself. Neutral colors, clean lines, nothing that stood out. Invisibility as armor. She reached the front door and checked the security camera first. Old habits. The screen showed Adrian Cole standing on the front steps, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed in the way that only dangerous men could look relaxed. Elena's stomach did a small, complicated flip. Adrian was one of Dominic's lieutenants, the one who handled negotiations when Dominic needed someone charming instead of threatening, the one who could walk into a room of enemies and walk out with a signed contract and 3 new contacts. He had the kind of easy smile that made people forget he'd once put a man in the hospital for touching his car. He also had, for the past 6 months, been extremely persistent about asking Elena out to dinner. She opened the door. "Adrian, it's late." "Not that late." His smile was warm, untroubled. "You eat dinner, don't you?" "I've eaten." "Then you drink coffee, or wine, or water with ice." He spread his hands. "Come on, Elena. One evening. I promise I'm moderately entertaining company." "I'm working." "You're always working." He leaned against the doorframe, not crossing the threshold. He knew better than that without invitation. "When was the last time you left this place for something that wasn't grocery shopping or a dentist appointment?" Elena wanted to argue with that, but he wasn't wrong. The estate had become her entire world. Safe, contained, uncomplicated in all the ways that mattered, except for the one complication that mattered more than all the others combined. "I don't think," she started. "Don't think," Adrian said. That's the whole point. Just one night, dinner, conversation, then I'll bring you back and never bother you again, if that's what you want." He wouldn't, though. Elena knew that much about Adrian. If she said yes tonight and it went badly, he'd respect her boundaries. He was a lot of things, but pushy wasn't one of them. This was his final play, and they both knew it. Maybe that's why she found herself saying, "Give me 10 minutes to change." His smile went sunrise bright. "Take 20, I'll wait." Elena closed the door and stood there for a moment, heart hammering in a way that felt disproportionate to agreeing to dinner. It was just dinner, just a few hours away from the estate, from the careful balance of professional distance she maintained every single day, just a few hours away from Dominic. She climbed the back stairs to her room, not servants' quarters exactly, but not part of the main house either. An in-between space, like everything else in her life here. Her room was neat to the point of sterile. A bed with white linens, a dresser, a small desk where she sometimes sat and pretended to read books she never finished. No photographs, no personal touches. Nothing that suggested she lived here instead of just existing between shifts. Elena changed into a simple dress, dark blue. The kind of thing that worked for nice dinners without trying too hard. She studied herself in the mirror and tried to remember the last time she'd looked at her own reflection as something other than a checklist. Hair neat? Check. Face clean? Check. Expression neutral? Check. When had she stopped seeing herself as a person with wants and needs and the right to both? She knew exactly when. 3 years ago. The day Dominic Moretti hired her and looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes and said, "I need someone competent, someone I can trust. Can you be that person?" And she'd said yes before she even knew what she was agreeing to. Now she grabbed her purse and headed back downstairs where Adrian waited exactly where she'd left him. He straightened when he saw her and something in his expression shifted. Appreciation maybe, but also something gentler. "You clean up nice, Brooks." "I clean up adequately," she corrected, but she smiled despite herself. They walked to his car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Adrian held the door for her without making a production of it, then slid into the driver's seat and pulled away from the estate with the easy confidence of someone who belonged there. Elena watched the gates close behind them in the side mirror and felt something loosen in her chest. She didn't notice the figure standing in the third-floor window, watching them leave. The restaurant Adrian chose was downtown, tucked into a restored brick building that managed to feel both elegant and unpretentious. Soft lighting, quiet jazz playing low enough to talk over, the kind of place where the servers knew when to appear and when to make themselves scarce. Elena had been to places like this before, but always in a professional capacity, dropping off documents for Dominic, picking up packages, running the 1,000 small errands that kept his world turning smoothly. She'd never been somewhere like this as herself. It felt strange. Good strange, but strange. Adrian ordered wine without looking at the price, and when the server left, he leaned back in his chair and studied her with open curiosity. "So, Elena Brooks, house manager extraordinaire. Tell me something I don't know about you." "There's probably a lot you don't know about me." "Exactly, so pick something." Elena took a sip of water, buying time. "I used to want to be a teacher." "Yeah, what stopped you?" The truth was complicated and involved student loans and a mother with medical bills and a series of choices that had seemed temporary at the time but had somehow become permanent. "Life," she said simply. "What about you? How does someone end up working for Dominic Moretti?" Adrian grinned. "You mean how does someone end up in organized crime?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." He swirled his wine. "I was going nowhere fast. Had a degree I wasn't using, a lot of ambition, and no particular moral compass about where to point it. Dominic gave me direction, purpose. A family, in a weird way." Family. Elena understood that. The estate had become her family too, even if it was a family of one where she kept house for a man who barely acknowledged her existence beyond professional necessity. Except that wasn't entirely true, was it? There were moments, small ones. Times when Dominic would look up from his desk and ask if she'd eaten. Mornings when she'd find her favorite coffee already brewing before she came downstairs. The winter he'd noticed her car struggling and had it replaced with a newer model without discussion, just keys left on her desk with a note that said, "More reliable." Moments that meant nothing. Moments that meant everything. "You're doing it again," Adrian said quietly. Elena blinked. "Doing what?" "Thinking about him." Her face went hot. "I don't know what you mean." "Elena." Adrian's voice was gentle, not accusing. "I've watched you for months. Every time someone mentions Dominic, your whole body changes. You lean in, your eyes focus. It's like the rest of the world goes dim and he's the only thing in color." Elena's hands tightened around her water glass. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Adrian leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I asked out a woman who's in love with someone else." The word, love, hit her like a physical blow. She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to do anything except sit there with her heart hammering and her face burning and the truth written across her expression in letters anyone could read. "It doesn't matter," she finally managed. "Why not?" "Because he's—" Elena stopped, searching for words that wouldn't betray too much. "Because men like Dominic don't see people like me. I'm staff. I'm furniture. I make his life easier and stay out of the way, and that's all I'm supposed to be." "You really believe that?" I know it. Adrian sat back and something shifted in his expression, sympathy mixed with frustration. You know what I think? I think Dominic Moretti is the smartest, most observant son of a bitch I've ever met, and I think he'd have to be blind not to see what's right in front of him. Adrian, I also think, he continued, that you've spent so long convincing yourself you don't matter that you can't see when someone's paying attention. Elena shook her head. This was a mistake. Coming here, having this conversation, letting herself imagine even for a second that she could be anything other than what she was, useful, reliable, invisible. I should go, she said quietly. No. Adrian's hand covered hers on the table, warm and solid. I'm sorry. That was out of line. Stay, please. Let's just have dinner. No more talk about feelings or Dominic or any of it. Just two people eating overpriced pasta and pretending the world's less complicated than it is. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Because leaving now would mean going back to the estate, to her careful routines and empty room, and she wasn't ready for that yet. They ordered food. Adrian kept his word and steered the conversation to safer topics. Books, movies, the ridiculous drama happening between two of the estate's security guards who were both trying to date the same woman from the cleaning service. Easy topics that required nothing from Elena except occasional laughter and the pretense of normalcy. But the earlier conversation hung between them like smoke, impossible to ignore even when they were both trying. Halfway through dinner, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went carefully neutral. Boss is asking where I am. Elena's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? The truth. Adrian typed something and set the phone aside. That I'm having dinner with you. Why would you? Because I don't lie to Dominic, not about anything that matters. Elena's pulse kicked up. Did this matter? Was she something that fell into the category of things Dominic needed to know about, or was this Adrian's way of forcing a reaction? Before she could decide, the restaurant door opened, and Dominic Moretti walked in. Elena's breath stopped. He didn't scan the room the way normal people did when looking for someone. He knew exactly where they were sitting. His eyes found them immediately, found her immediately, and the look on his face was nothing Elena had ever seen before. Not anger exactly, something colder and more controlled, but with heat underneath, like a fire that had learned to burn without light. Adrian saw him and didn't look surprised. That was fast. You told him where we were, Elena said, and it wasn't a question. I told him I'd be at Marchese's. What he does with that information is up to him. Dominic crossed the restaurant with the kind of presence that made other diners look up without knowing why. He was dressed for business, dark suit, no tie, the kind of expensive simplicity that communicated power without effort. His hair was slightly disarranged, like he'd been running his hands through it. He stopped at their table. Adrian? His voice was level, controlled. We need to talk. We're in the middle of dinner, Adrian said easily. Can it wait? No. The single word carried enough weight to end the discussion. Adrian sighed and stood, squeezing Elena's shoulder briefly. Order dessert. This won't take long. Elena watched them walk toward the back of the restaurant, toward an alcove that probably led to the kitchen or office space. Dominic's hand was on Adrian's shoulder, not rough, but not gentle either. Steering, controlling. She should leave. She should signal the waiter, pay the check, call a car, and get back to the estate before this situation spiraled into something she couldn't fix. Instead, she sat there and felt her heart hammer against her ribs and wondered what the hell was happening. In the private office that the restaurant manager had wisely vacated the moment Dominic appeared, the two men stood facing each other. The air between them was charged, electric with things unsaid. You want to tell me what you're doing? Dominic's voice was quiet, deadly. Adrian met his eyes without flinching. Having dinner with a beautiful woman. Last I checked, that wasn't against company policy. Don't play games with me. I'm not playing anything. Adrian crossed his arms. I asked Elena out. She said yes. We're having dinner. What part of that requires your personal intervention? Dominic's jaw tightened. She's not available. Really? Because when I asked her, she seemed pretty available. She's staff. She's a person, Adrian interrupted. A person who works for you. Yeah, but that doesn't make her property. She's allowed to have a life. She's allowed to say yes when someone asks her to dinner. Not you. The words came out harder than Dominic probably intended. Adrian's eyebrows rose. Not me specifically, or not anyone? Dominic didn't answer, and his silence was more revealing than any words could have been. Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really going to do this? You going to stand there and tell me I can't take her out when you haven't made a single move yourself in 3 years? This isn't about... It's exactly about that. Adrian took a step closer, dropping his voice. I've known you a long time, Dom. Long enough to see when you're lying to yourself. You watch her. You find reasons to be in whatever room she's in. You replaced her entire car because you didn't like hearing it struggle in the morning. You're halfway in love with her, and you're too stubborn or too scared to admit it. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Adrian's expression softened. Look, I get it. Your world doesn't have room for complications, for vulnerability, for caring about someone who isn't part of the business. But Elena isn't going to wait forever for you to figure out what you want. And he paused. I like her, a lot. So if you're not going to do anything about it, get out of my way and let me. Dominic's hand shot out and grabbed Adrian's collar, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to make a point. Stay away from her. Adrian didn't try to break free. He just looked at Dominic with something like pity. Make me understand why. Give me one good reason that isn't about control or territory or any of the bullshit rules you live by. Because Dominic stopped. The words caught somewhere between his brain and his mouth. Because she's mine. Because I can't stand watching her smile at you. Because the thought of her with someone else makes me want to burn the world down. Because I'm terrified. Because what? Adrian pressed. Dominic released him and stepped back, running both hands through his hair. Just stop. Whatever this is, end it tonight. That's not my call to make. Adrian straightened his collar. She's out there right now, and she has a choice. If you want to influence that choice, maybe you should try talking to her instead of threatening me. He walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, she's not in love with me. She's barely noticed I exist. But you? He looked back at Dominic. You, she sees. Every time you walk in a room, every time you say her name. So whatever you're protecting her from by staying away, ask yourself if it's worse than what you're doing to her right now. Then he was gone, and Dominic stood alone in the borrowed office with his heart pounding and his carefully constructed world cracking at the foundations. Elena was still at the table when Adrian returned, though she'd pushed her plate away and was staring at her water glass like it held answers. She looked up when he sat down. What happened? Nothing important. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Boss just wanted to discuss some business. Adrian, Elena. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Not polite, not professional. Honest. She nodded slowly. Do you have feelings for Dominic Moretti? The question hung there, impossible to dodge. Elena could lie, should lie, but Adrian had been kind to her, patient, and he deserved more than another layer of pretense. Yes, she whispered. Adrian nodded like she'd confirmed something he already knew. Does he know? No, and it doesn't matter because... It matters! Adrian squeezed her hand gently. It matters because you're sitting here with me trying to pretend you're available when your whole heart is back at that estate. And I'm sitting here knowing that no matter how many dinners we have, I'm always going to be competing with someone who isn't even in the room. Tears pricked Elena's eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be. He released her hand and sat back. You didn't do anything wrong. Hell, you probably didn't even realize what you were doing, but I can't. He laughed softly. I can't be someone's second choice. I deserve better than that, and so do you. I'm not choosing anything, Elena said. There's nothing to choose. Dominic doesn't... He's not an option. He's my employer. That's all. You really believe that? I have to. Adrian studied her for a long moment, and Elena saw the exact second he made his decision. Something shifted in his expression, hardened. Come with me, he said, standing. What? Where? Just trust me. He threw cash on the table, too much, but Adrian never counted when he was making a point, and held out his hand. Elena took it because she didn't know what else to do and let him guide her through the restaurant toward the back, toward the alcove where Dominic had disappeared earlier. The door was still closed. Adrian knocked once, then opened it without waiting for permission. Dominic stood with his back to them, staring out a small window that overlooked an alley. He turned when they entered, and his eyes went immediately to Elena, then to her hand in Adrian's. His expression went blank, carefully, deliberately blank. "We need to settle this," Adrian said. "Right now, all of us." "Adrian, don't—" Elena tried to pull her hand free, but he held on. "Elena's in love with you," Adrian said bluntly. "Has been for a while, from what I can tell. And you—" He looked at Dominic. "You're clearly not as indifferent as you pretend to be. So either do something about it or let her go. But stop with this halfway bullshit where she lives in your house and exists in your peripheral vision and never gets to be more than the person who makes your coffee." The silence that followed was crushing. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process that Adrian that he'd actually said. She forced herself to look at Dominic. His face was still blank, unreadable, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. "Is that true?" His voice was rough, like the words had torn something coming out. Elena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Yes," she wanted to scream. "Yes, I love you. I've loved you since the day you asked if I could be trusted, and I've been trying not to love you every day since because it's impossible and hopeless and completely one-sided." "Elena." Now his voice was softer, and that was somehow worse. "Is that true?" She managed a nod, barely. Dominic's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, something in them had changed. The blankness was gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded and terrifying in its intensity. He crossed the room in 3 strides and took her face in his hands, tilting her head up so she had to meet his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're Dominic Moretti," Elena stammered. "You're my boss. You're untouchable. You're yours," he said quietly. "If you want me, I'm yours." And then he kissed her. The world stopped, tilted, reformed itself around the impossible fact of Dominic's mouth on hers, his hands in her hair, his body close enough that she could feel his heart hammering as hard as her own. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was 3 years of wanting compressed into a single desperate connection. All the careful distance they'd maintained burned away in seconds. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian was leaning against the doorframe with a satisfied smile. "Well, that's settled then." Elena couldn't look away from Dominic. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his expression still raw and open in a way she'd never seen before. "I need to take you home," he said. "We need to talk, really talk." She nodded, not trusting her voice. Dominic's hand found hers and held on like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. He looked at Adrian. "Thank you." Adrian shrugged. "Somebody had to do it. You were both too stubborn to figure it out on your own." He pushed off the doorframe. "I'll see myself out. You two talk, or whatever." He left, and Elena and Dominic stood there in the small office, hands joined, the air between them still charged with everything unsaid. "I'm sorry," Dominic said finally, "for making you think you didn't matter, for being so careful about keeping distance that I made you feel invisible." "You didn't—" "I did." His grip on her hand tightened. "Adrian was right about all of it. I watched you. I found excuses to be near you. I told myself it was just appreciation for good work. But it was never just that." "Then why didn't you say anything?" Dominic's jaw worked. "Because people I care about get hurt. Because my world is dangerous and complicated, and I didn't want to drag you into it any more than you already were. Because I've spent my entire adult life learning to control everything, and you—" He laughed softly, bitterly. "You made me feel completely out of control." Elena reached up and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "I'm already in it. I've been in your world for 3 years, living in your house, managing your life. The only difference is whether I get to actually be with you or just exist at the edges." "It's not safe." "I don't care about safe." The words surprised her with their vehemence. "I care about you. I care about waking up every morning and knowing I'll see you. I care about the way you drink your coffee and hate small talk and pretend you don't notice when I stay up too late reading in the library. I care about all of it, even the parts that scare me." Dominic pulled her closer, wrapping her in his arms, and Elena felt something inside her chest crack open. Relief, joy, terror, all of it at once. "This changes everything," he murmured against her hair. "I know. People will talk. There will be complications. I know that too." He pulled back enough to look at her. "I can't promise it'll be easy. I can't even promise I'll be good at this. I've never—" He stopped, and Elena saw something vulnerable flash across his face. "I've never let anyone this close before." "Then we'll figure it out together," Elena said. "Both of us. No more hiding. No more pretending." Dominic kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the feel of her. When he pulled back, his expression had shifted into something almost like wonder. "Let's go home," he said. Home. The word meant something different now. They left through the back exit to avoid the main dining room, Dominic's hand never leaving hers. His car was parked in the alley. Of course it was. And he opened the door for her with a gentleness that made her chest ache. The drive back to the estate was quiet. Dominic kept one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around hers, thumb tracing absent circles on her palm. Elena watched the city lights blur past and tried to process that this was real, that she wasn't going to wake up in her austere little room and find out the whole night had been a dream. When they pulled through the estate gates, Dominic didn't park in his usual spot. Instead, he pulled around to the private garage, the one only he used. Killing the engine, he turned to face her fully. "Before we go inside," he said carefully, "I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we're together, it can't be halfway. I don't know how to do anything halfway." "I don't want halfway," Elena said. "You'll have to leave your room. Move into the main house. With me." Her breath caught. That was a bigger step than she'd been prepared for, but even as her brain tried to catalog all the reasons to slow down, her heart was already 3 steps ahead. "Okay," she whispered. "People will know. Staff, associates, everyone in my world. They'll know you're not just my house manager anymore." "What will I be?" Dominic's hand came up to cup her face. "Mine, if that's what you want. My partner. My—" He struggled with the word like it was foreign to his tongue. "My girlfriend. Eventually more, if you'll have me." Elena's eyes stung with tears. "Yes, to all of it. Yes." He kissed her again, and this time there was relief in it, like he'd been holding his breath waiting for her answer. When they finally made it inside, Dominic guided her not to her old room, but up the main staircase to the 3rd floor, to his private wing. His bedroom was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd pictured something cold and austere, all dark wood and masculine minimalism. Instead, it was surprisingly warm, soft lighting, comfortable furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that made her fingers itch to explore. There was a fireplace, currently dark, and large windows that overlooked the gardens. It looked like a place where someone actually lived, not just existed. "I wasn't expecting—" Elena gestured vaguely. "What? That I'd have actual furniture?" Dominic smiled slightly. "I spend a lot of time up here. It's the only place I can think without someone needing something from me. And now you're inviting me into it." "Now I'm inviting you into it," he agreed. He pulled her close again, and Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat gradually slow from racing to steady. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. What if it doesn't work? What if we're better at the distance than we are at this?" Dominic's arms tightened around her. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." "But Elena," he tilted her face up. "I've spent 3 years watching you from across rooms and pretending I didn't want more. I'm done pretending. I'd rather fail at being with you than succeed at staying away." Elena kissed him, and this time it was her initiating, her hand sliding into his hair, her body pressing against his. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, and Dominic made a sound low in his throat that sent heat spiraling through her. "Stay with me tonight," he said against her mouth. "Not because you work here, not because you have to, but because you want to." "I want to," Elena breathed. They barely made it to the bed. Gutat. Later, much later, Elena lay curled against Dominic's side, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped securely around her. The room was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. "What are you thinking?" Dominic's voice rumbled under her ear. That I should have worn something nicer to dinner. He laughed, and the sound vibrated through both of them. Why? Because if I'd known how the night would end, I would have, I don't know, put in more effort. His hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. You're perfect exactly as you are. Elena propped herself up to look at him. You don't have to say things like that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true. His expression was serious now. You want to know what I was thinking the first time I saw you? When you hired me? Before that, when you walked into the interview. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I thought you looked like you were braced for a fight, like you were ready to defend yourself against whatever I might throw at you. And I thought, I want to know what made her that way. I want to know everything. That's why you hired me? I hired you because you were qualified and you didn't flinch when I asked hard questions. But I kept you around because every day you surprised me. The way you organized chaos. The way you handled problems without making them my problems. The way you existed in my space without demanding anything from it. I demanded things, Elena protested. Better coffee, a budget increase for household repairs, that ridiculous new vacuum system. You demanded things for the house, never for yourself. His thumb traced her lower lip. That's what I noticed most. You never asked for more than exactly what you needed, like you didn't think you deserved to want things. Elena's throat tightened. I wanted you. I know that now. He pulled her back down against his chest. And you have me, completely. Even the parts that are difficult. They lay there in comfortable silence, and Elena felt herself starting to drift. But something Dominic had said earlier nagged at her, pulling her back from the edge of sleep. You said people you care about get hurt, she said quietly. What did you mean? Dominic's body tensed slightly. It's late. We can talk about... No. Elena pushed herself up again. No more deflecting. No more protecting me from your world by keeping me at arm's length. If we're doing this, I need to know what I'm walking into. Dominic studied her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he sighed. My father ran this organization before me. He was ruthless, efficient, and completely loyal to the people he cared about, including my mother. Elena waited, sensing there was more. She died when I was 16. Car accident. Except it wasn't an accident. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. It was a message from a rival family. They couldn't get to my father directly, so they went after the person he loved most. Dominic. He fell apart after that. Made reckless decisions. Started a war that cost dozens of lives and accomplished nothing except more death. By the time I was 18, he was dead too, killed by someone in his own organization who thought he'd become a liability. Elena's hand found his in the darkness, squeezing tight. I learned two things from watching that, Dominic continued. 1, caring about someone makes you vulnerable. 2, vulnerability in my world gets people killed. He looked at her. So I built my life around control, around keeping everyone at a distance. It worked for 20 years. And then you walked into my house and made it impossible to maintain that distance. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. Don't be sorry for existing. His hand cupped her face. Be aware. Be careful. But don't be sorry. Are we in danger? Right now? No more than usual. My father's enemies are long gone. The organization is stable. But there are always people watching, always someone looking for an opening. He pulled her close again. That's why I need you to promise me something. What? If I ask you to do something for your safety, go somewhere, stay away from someone, leave a situation, you don't question it, you just do it. Elena wanted to argue, to insist she wouldn't be ordered around like a child, but she understood what he was really asking. Trust me to protect you. Let me keep you safe the only way I know how. Okay, she agreed. But you have to promise me something too. What's that? Don't shut me out when things get difficult. Don't go back to keeping distance between us because you think it's safer. If we're in this together, we stay in it together. Dominic was quiet for so long that Elena thought he might not answer. Then, I promise to try. That's the best I can offer right now. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even entirely reassuring. But it was honest, and Elena found she valued that more than any pretty lie. She settled back against him, and this time when sleep pulled at her, she let it win. Morning came softly, sunlight filtering through the curtains in gentle increments. Elena woke slowly, awareness returning in pieces. The unfamiliar room, the warm body beside her, the events of last night rushing back in a cascade of memory. She turned her head and found Dominic already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "Hi." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years." She stretched, then froze. "Oh God, what time is it? There's staff arriving at 8, and the grocery delivery, and—" "Elena." Dominic's hand on her shoulder stopped the spiral. "It's handled." "What do you mean it's handled?" "I mean, I sent a message to the senior staff last night. They're managing things this morning. You're taking the day off." "I can't just—" "You can. You are." He pulled her back down when she tried to sit up. "The house will not fall apart without you for one day, and we need time to figure out how this works." "How what works?" "Us. Our new arrangement." His hand traced the line of her shoulder. "You living here instead of in the staff wing. You being my partner instead of my employee." Reality crashed back in. "I'm still your employee. Technically, but we both know that's going to change. You can't manage the house and be with me, not in any way that makes sense." Elena's stomach knotted. "Are you firing me?" "No. No. I'm promoting you." At her confused look, he elaborated. "The estate needs a manager regardless, but it doesn't need to be you. We'll hire someone else to handle the day-to-day operations. You—" He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "You can do whatever you want. Go back to school. Work somewhere else. Stay here and do nothing if that's what makes you happy. You want me to be dependent on you. I want you to be free to choose what you actually want instead of what you need to survive." His voice was firm. "There's a difference." Elena sat up fully now, pulling the sheet around her. "This is too fast. Yesterday I was making your coffee and organizing your schedule. Today you want to completely restructure my life? Yesterday you loved me from a distance and pretended you didn't. Today you're in my bed and in my heart, and I'm not interested in half measures." He sat up too, meeting her eyes. "But if you need time to adjust, I'll give you time. We can take this as slowly as you need. Except for the part where I'm already in your bedroom and you've already told the staff something's changed." Dominic had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "I may have gotten ahead of myself there." Despite everything, Elena laughed. "May have?" "Definitely did." He took her hand. "I'm not good at this. At relationships. At being vulnerable. I'm going to make mistakes. So am I. Then we'll make them together." He kissed her knuckles. "But right now, can we just have today? No staff, no obligations, no world outside this room, just us figuring out what this looks like." Elena wanted to argue that they couldn't just hide from reality, but she also wanted exactly what he was offering: time to exist in this new thing between them without the weight of everyone else's expectations. "Okay," she said. "Today, just us." The smile he gave her was worth every complicated thing that would inevitably follow. They spent the morning in bed, talking, laughing, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with work or professional distance. Dominic told her about growing up in the organization, about the weight of inheriting his father's empire. Elena talked about her mother, about the years of medical bills and sacrifice that had shaped her understanding of what she owed the world. "You don't owe anything," Dominic said fiercely when she mentioned feeling like she had to earn her place. "Not to me, not to anyone. You exist. That's enough." Spoken like someone who's never had to worry about money. Spoken like someone who loves you and hates hearing you diminish yourself. The word, love, hung between them, big and terrifying and wonderful. "You love me?" Elena's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Yes." No hesitation, no qualification, just truth. "You barely know me. I know everything that matters. I know you're loyal and competent and kind, even when you don't have to be. I know you remember how everyone on staff takes their coffee. I know you read before bed and prefer old books to new ones, and you hum when you think no one's listening." He pulled her close. "I know you make me want to be better than I am. That's enough to build on." Elena kissed him, and the kiss said everything she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. They finally left the bedroom around noon, and Dominic made her breakfast. Or tried to. He was, it turned out, spectacularly incompetent in the kitchen. "How do you live here and not know how to make eggs?" Elena asked, laughing as he stared at the pan like it had personally offended him. "I have people for that. Had people. You." He pointed the spatula at her. "You made eggs. Because I knew how." Exactly. Division of labor. But he was smiling, and when Elena took over the cooking, he stood behind her with his arms around her waist and his chin on her shoulder, and it felt absurdly domestic. It felt right. They ate on the terrace overlooking the gardens, and Elena tried not to think about how this was where she'd served Dominic breakfast hundreds of times. How strange it was to sit across from him as an equal instead of standing ready to refill his coffee. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked. "That this is weird. Good weird, but weird. Give it time. It'll start feeling normal." "Will it? Or will I always be waiting for someone to tell me I don't belong here?" Dominic reached across the table and took her hand. "You belong anywhere I am. That's the rule now." Simple, absolute, completely impractical in execution, but Elena found she wanted to believe it anyway. They spent the afternoon in the library, Dominic working on his laptop while Elena curled up in one of the leather chairs with a book she'd been meaning to read for months. It was comfortable, easy, the kind of companionable silence that usually took years to develop. Every so often, Dominic would look up and find her watching him, and his expression would soften into something that made her chest ache. "I could get used to this," he said during one of those moments. "To what? Having you here, like this. Not rushing off to manage something or fix a problem, just existing in the same space." "I existed in the same space before. Not like this. Before you were always on guard, always professional. Now," he gestured vaguely, "now you're just Elena." She understood what he meant. The careful mask she'd worn for 3 years had cracked irreparably. There was no going back to that distant professionalism, no matter what happened next. As evening approached, reality began creeping back in. Dominic had calls to make, decisions that couldn't wait another day. Elena watched him transform from the man who'd made her laugh in the kitchen to the cold, calculating boss she'd always known, and felt the first flicker of doubt. Could those two people coexist? Could she love both versions of him? When he finished his last call, Dominic found her back on the terrace, watching the sun set over the city. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and some of the tension in her shoulders eased. "Tomorrow it gets complicated," he said quietly. "I know. People will have questions, opinions. Some of them won't be happy about this. I know that too." He turned her to face him. "But tonight is still ours. One more night before the world gets its say." Elena kissed him, and yes, she thought. Yes to all of it. To the complications and the questions and the impossible reality of loving a man whose world was built on control and power. Yes to choosing him anyway. They went back inside as darkness fell, and this time when Dominic took her to bed, it felt less like discovery and more like coming home. This was theirs now, this space, this connection, this terrifying leap into the unknown. And as Elena drifted off to sleep wrapped in Dominic's arms, she thought maybe that was enough. Maybe love didn't need to be perfect or safe or sensible. Maybe it just needed to be chosen. Again and again and again. Morning came too soon and brought reality with it. Elena woke to find Dominic already dressed, standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was clipped, professional, the voice he used when issuing orders that weren't up for negotiation. She stayed quiet, watching him pace, and felt the warmth of last night starting to cool in the face of what came next. He ended the call and turned to find her awake. His expression softened immediately, but she could see the tension still riding his shoulders. "I have to go into the office," he said. "There's a situation with one of the shipping contracts." "It's fine, I should get back to—" Elena stopped, remembering. She didn't have a role to get back to. Not the same one, anyway. Dominic crossed to the bed and sat on the edge, his hand finding hers. "I talked to Marcus this morning. He's going to start interviewing candidates for the house manager position." Marcus was Dominic's head of operations, the man who handled everything from payroll to security schedules. Efficient, discreet, and absolutely terrifying when he wanted to be. That fast? Elena's stomach twisted. The sooner we transition things, the cleaner it'll be, for both of us. He squeezed her hand. I don't want you in limbo, wondering where you fit. And where do I fit? With me, wherever that means. He leaned in and kissed her forehead. I'll be back by early afternoon. Make yourself at home. The whole house, not just this room. After he left, Elena sat in the too large bed in the too quiet room and tried to figure out what making herself at home actually meant. For 3 years, she'd known exactly where she belonged in this house. In the margins, managing the invisible machinery that kept everything running. Now those boundaries had dissolved, and she felt unmoored. She showered in Dominic's bathroom, using his soap because she didn't have any of her own up here yet. Got dressed in yesterday's clothes because all her things were still in her old room. Stood in front of his closet and felt like an intruder despite his invitation to treat this space as hers. The house felt different in daylight without a task list driving her movements. She walked the halls she'd walked thousands of times before, but now she noticed details she'd always been too busy to see. The way morning light hit the staircase, the faint scent of lemon polish the cleaning staff used, the small crack in the crown molding on the second-floor landing that she'd meant to have fixed but never got around to. In the kitchen, she found Maria, the head cook, preparing lunch. The older woman looked up when Elena entered, and something complicated flashed across her face. Miss Elena. Her tone was carefully neutral. Can I get you something? Miss Elena. Not just Elena, like it had been yesterday morning. The title was a buffer, a way of acknowledging that something had changed without having to name it directly. Just coffee. Thanks. Maria poured a cup and set it on the counter, then went back to chopping vegetables with focused intensity. The silence stretched uncomfortable and strange. Maria, Elena started. Is it true? Maria didn't look up from her cutting board. What people are saying. Elena's chest tightened. What are they saying? That you're with Mr. Moretti now, that you're moving into his rooms. Maria's knife paused. That we're hiring your replacement. The words landed like accusations, even though Maria's tone stayed level. It's true, Elena said quietly. Maria nodded once, her knife resuming its rhythmic work. I see. Say what you're thinking. It's not my place. Please. Elena moved closer. We've worked together for 3 years. If you have something to say, I'd rather hear it. Maria set down her knife and finally met Elena's eyes. I'm thinking you were one of us. Staff. You understood what it meant to work here, to keep your head down and do your job. And now, she gestured vaguely, now you're something else, something separate. I'm still me. Are you? Maria's expression wasn't unkind, just honest. Because the Elena I knew wouldn't have left the rest of us to figure out a transition with no warning. She would have made sure everything was covered before making a change this big. The criticism stung because it was valid. Elena had been so focused on her own confused emotions that she hadn't thought about how this would affect the people who'd worked alongside her, who'd trusted her to maintain stability. You're right, Elena admitted. I should have. I didn't plan this, any of it. But that's not an excuse. Maria studied her for a long moment. Then her expression softened slightly. He's a good man, Mr. Moretti. Fair, loyal to the people who work for him. But his world isn't easy. It asks a lot. I know. Do you? Maria picked up her knife again. I've been here 12 years. I've seen people come into his orbit thinking they understand what they're signing up for. Most don't last. The ones who do learn to accept that there are parts of his life they'll never see, never understand, and asking questions about those parts is a good way to end up gone. Elena felt cold despite the warm kitchen. Is that a warning? It's experience. Maria's knife moved steadily through a carrot. Love him if you want, but keep your eyes open. And don't forget where you came from. Elena took her coffee and left before the conversation could dig any deeper. Maria's words followed her through the halls, settling like weight in her chest. She ended up in the library, surrounded by books that had always felt like friends. Here, at least, nothing had changed. The leather chairs still sat in their familiar positions. The afternoon light still hit the far wall at exactly the same angle. This room existed outside of whatever upheaval was reshaping the rest of her life. She was 3 chapters into a novel she'd started months ago when her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Meeting running long. Won't be back until dinner. You okay? Elena stared at the message. Such a simple question. Was she okay? Fine, she typed back. Take your time. The lie felt necessary. He had enough to deal with without her unloading doubt and anxiety via text message. Another buzz, this time from a number she didn't recognize. This is Adrian. I know things are probably weird right now. If you need to talk to someone who isn't Dominic or the staff, I'm around. Elena's throat tightened. She'd almost forgotten about Adrian in the chaos of the past 24 hours. The man who'd pushed them together, who'd laid his own feelings aside to force a truth neither she nor Dominic had been brave enough to speak. Thank you, she sent back. I appreciate it. Mean it. You're going to need allies. This life isn't easy to navigate alone. She set the phone down and tried to focus on her book, but the words blurred together. Outside the library windows, she could see two security guards making their rounds, Jake and Peter, both of whom she'd chatted with hundreds of times while doing her morning checks. Now she wondered if they looked at her differently, if everyone did. By the time Dominic returned that evening, Elena had worked herself into a quiet spiral of anxiety. She heard his car in the drive, his footsteps in the hall, and felt her shoulders tense despite wanting nothing more than to feel relief at his presence. He found her still in the library, now staring at the same page she'd been stuck on for an hour. Hey. He looked tired, his tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it. Sorry I'm late. The contract situation turned into a whole thing. It's fine. He studied her face, and she watched his expression shift from tired to concerned. What's wrong? Nothing. Just a long day. Elena. He sat down in the chair across from her. We promised. No more halfway. Talk to me. She closed her book and tried to find words for the tangle in her chest. I don't know how to be here anymore. In this house. I spent all day feeling like I don't fit anywhere. Not with the staff, not in your world, not even in my own skin. Dominic leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's going to take time. For everyone, not just you. Maria thinks I abandoned them. The staff. She's probably right. You didn't abandon anyone. You fell in love. Those aren't the same thing, aren't they? From where she's standing, I traded loyalty to the team for a relationship with the boss. That's not... It doesn't look good. Dominic was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. Do you regret it? No. The answer came immediately, from somewhere deeper than doubt. But that doesn't mean I know how to handle it. Then we figure it out together. He reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. Today was always going to be hard. First day of a new reality, everyone adjusting, lines being redrawn. It'll get easier. You don't know that. You're right, I don't. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But I know I'm not letting you spiral alone. So talk to me. Tell me what you need. Elena looked at their joined hands and felt something loosen in her chest. I need my things from my old room. I can't keep wearing the same clothes and borrowing your soap. A smile tugged at Dominic's mouth. That's an easy fix. We can move everything tonight. I need to talk to the staff properly. Not just let them hear things secondhand. Okay. We can arrange a meeting tomorrow. And I need... She stopped, not sure how to voice the next part. What? I need to know this is real. That I'm not just going to wake up and find out you've changed your mind. Dominic stood and pulled her up with him, gathering her into his arms. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm terrible at a lot of things. Relationships, vulnerability, talking about feelings without wanting to punch something. But I'm very good at commitment. When I decide something matters, it matters. And you matter. Elena buried her face against his chest and breathed him in. He smelled like expensive cologne, and the city and something underneath that was just him. I'm probably going to be a mess for a while. That's okay. I'm a mess too. We'll be disasters together. She laughed despite everything and felt him smile against her hair. They spent the next hour moving Elena's belongings from her old room to Dominic's wing. It didn't take long. She'd never accumulated much. A few boxes of books, her clothes, some photographs of her mother. The physical evidence of her life fit into 6 trips, which felt both liberating and a little sad. When they were done, Dominic ordered dinner from a restaurant downtown, and they ate on the terrace while the city lights flickered on below. He told her about the contract dispute, about the delicate negotiations required to keep everyone happy without appearing weak. She told him about Maria's warning, about feeling untethered. Adrian texted me, she mentioned, Said I could talk to him if I needed to. Dominic's expression went carefully neutral. That was decent of him. You're okay with that? With us being friends? Why wouldn't I be? Because he wanted, Elena paused, because he asked me out first. And you chose me. Dominic set down his fork. I trust you. I trust him. And honestly, you're going to need people in your corner who understand this world. Adrian's good people. Even though he has feelings for me? Had feelings. Past tense. Dominic's voice was firm. He made his play. It didn't work out, and he moved on like an adult. That's more than a lot of men would do. Elena wanted to believe it was that simple, but she'd seen the way Adrian looked at her during dinner. That kind of feeling didn't just evaporate overnight. Still, she appreciated Dominic's trust. It would have been easy for him to be possessive, to cut Adrian out entirely. The fact that he didn't said something about his confidence in what they were building. After dinner, they ended up back in bed, though this time it was less about desperation and more about comfort. Dominic held her close, one hand tracing lazy patterns on her back, and Elena felt herself starting to relax for the first time all day. Tell me something, she said into the darkness. Something you've never told anyone else. That's a dangerous question. I know. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, I hate this life sometimes. Elena went still. What? The organization. The constant negotiations and power plays and having to calculate every move 3 steps ahead. I'm good at it. I've built something stable and profitable, but there are days I wake up and wish I could just walk away from all of it. Why don't you? Because it's not that simple. This isn't a job you resign from. And even if I could, what would I do? This is all I've ever known. His arms tightened around her. But lately I've been thinking about it more, about what a different life might look like. Because of me? Because of you, he confirmed. You make me want things I stopped letting myself want a long time ago. Normal things. A relationship that isn't complicated by business. A future that's about more than maintaining power. Elena propped herself up to look at him. I don't want you to change your whole life for me. I'm not. I'm changing it for us. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But it's not going to happen overnight, and there will be complications. People who depend on me, obligations I can't just walk away from. I know. Do you? Because I need you to understand. This world I'm in, it's not clean. There are parts of my business that operate in gray areas. Legal technically, but not exactly ethical. And there are people in my orbit who are dangerous. Like who? Dominic hesitated. There's a family in Chicago, the Salvatores. We have a mutual non-aggression arrangement. We stay out of their territory, they stay out of ours. But the old man who ran things died last year, and his son Vincent took over. Vincent's ambitious, unstable. He's been pushing boundaries, testing limits. Is that a threat? Not yet. But it could become one. His hand cupped her face. That's why I need you to promise me again. If I tell you to do something for safety reasons, you do it. No questions, no arguments. Dominic, please, Elena, this is important. She saw the fear underneath his carefully controlled expression and realized this wasn't about control. It was about the very real possibility that loving him could put her in danger. I promise, she said quietly. He kissed her, and there was desperation in it that hadn't been there before, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her, just in case. When they finally broke apart, Elena forced herself to ask the question she'd been avoiding. Have you ever killed anyone? Dominic went very still. Do you really want to know the answer to that? Yes. He studied her face for a long moment, and she could see him weighing truth against protection. No, I've never personally pulled a trigger or wielded a knife. But I've given orders that resulted in people dying. Does that count? Elena's breath caught. She'd known, logically, that Dominic's world involved violence. But hearing him confirm it made it real in a way that theoretical knowledge hadn't. How many? 3. All of them were threats to the organization. All of them had chances to walk away or make peace. His voice was steady, matter of fact. I'm not proud of it, but I don't regret it either. In my world, hesitation gets you killed. Elena should have been horrified, should have been scrambling out of bed, out of his life back to some version of safety where the men she loved didn't order executions. Instead, she found herself asking, "Do you lose sleep over it?" Sometimes. Not because I think I made the wrong call, but because I wonder what kind of person that makes me. Whether there's a line between necessary and monstrous, and if I've crossed it without noticing. You're not a monster. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Elena's hand found his chest, resting over his heart. Monsters don't question themselves. They don't worry about lines. They don't fall in love with their house manager and try to give her a better life. Dominic's laugh was rough, almost broken. You have too much faith in me. Maybe you don't have enough in yourself. He pulled her close again, and they lay there in silence while the truth of who he was settled between them. Elena waited for regret to surface, for some instinct of self-preservation to kick in and send her running. It didn't come. Whatever that said about her, she'd deal with it later. The next morning arrived with a schedule. Dominic had a conference call at 8, meetings until noon, and then he'd promised to be present when Elena addressed the household staff. She appreciated the structure, the return to something resembling normal, even if normal had been completely redefined. She found herself in the kitchen again, this time deliberately seeking out Maria. The older woman was kneading bread dough with the kind of focused aggression that suggested she had things on her mind. "Can we talk?" Elena asked. Maria didn't stop working. "We're talking now." Really talk, not just polite exchanges. Maria's hands stilled in the dough. She wiped them on her apron and turned to face Elena fully. "What do you want me to say? That I approve? That I think this is a good idea?" "I want you to be honest." "Fine. Honest." Maria crossed her arms. "I think you're playing with fire. I think you're in over your head. And I think when this goes badly, because it will go badly, these things always do, you're going to be the one who gets burned while he goes back to his perfectly ordered life." The words hit hard, but Elena forced herself not to flinch. "You might be right." Maria blinked. "What?" "You might be absolutely right. This could blow up spectacularly. I could end up hurt, unemployed, and alone." Elena met her eyes. "But I'd rather take that risk than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." "That's foolish." "Probably, but it's my choice to make." They stared at each other, and something in Maria's expression shifted. Not approval exactly, but maybe respect. "If you're going to do this," Maria said slowly, "you need to understand something. The staff is watching. How you handle yourself, how you treat us now that your position has changed. It matters. You act like you're better than us now, like you've moved up and we're beneath you, and you'll lose any goodwill you built over the past 3 years." "I don't think I'm better than anyone." "Then prove it. When you talk to everyone later, don't make excuses. Don't apologize for falling in love. Just be straight about what's changing and what's staying the same." Elena nodded. "I can do that." "And Elena?" Maria's voice softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I hope I'm wrong. About all of it. I hope you and Mr. Moretti find a way to make this work." It wasn't quite a blessing, but it was close enough. The staff meeting happened in the main dining room at 1 o'clock. Dominic stood beside Elena, his presence solid and grounding, while the household employees filed in. Maria, the cleaning staff, the security team, the groundskeepers. About 20 people total, all of whom looked varying degrees of curious, concerned, and uncomfortable. Elena's hands were shaking, so she clasped them together and forced herself to stand straight. "Thank you all for coming," she started. "I know there's been talk, and I wanted to address it directly, rather than let rumors fill in the gaps." She saw several people exchange glances. "As of this week, I'm no longer serving as house manager. We'll be hiring someone new for that position, and I'll help with the transition to make sure it's as smooth as possible." Elena took a breath. "The reason for this change is that Dominic and I are together now, in a personal relationship, and we both agreed that me managing the household while also being with him created too many conflicts of interest." Silence. Heavy and judging and impossible to read. "I know this is sudden," Elena continued, "and I know it changes the dynamic we've had. But I want to be clear, the respect I have for all of you, the appreciation for the work you do, that hasn't changed. You're not just employees to me. You're people I've worked alongside, learned from, and genuinely care about." More silence. Then Jake, one of the security guards, raised his hand. "So what happens to you? You just living here now?" "For now? Yes. Beyond that, I'm still figuring out." "Must be nice," someone muttered from the back. Elena couldn't see who. Dominic stiffened beside her, but she touched his arm lightly. This was hers to handle. "You're right," she said. "It is nice. I'm incredibly lucky to be with someone I love who loves me back. But that doesn't mean it's easy or simple or that I don't understand how it looks from the outside." A woman named Sarah, who cleaned the upper floors, spoke up. "Are we supposed to call you something different now? Ma'am or Mrs. Moretti or what?" "Elena, same as always." She managed a small smile. "I'm still just me, even if the job title's changed." "Yeah, but you're sleeping with the boss," Sarah said bluntly. "That's not just you. That's a whole different power dynamic." Elena felt her face heat, but she didn't look away. "You're right about that too, which is why I want to be as transparent as possible. If you have concerns, questions, issues with how things are being handled, bring them to Marcus or to the new house manager when they're hired. Don't feel like you have to stay silent because you think I have influence over your jobs." "Do you?" This from Peter, Jake's partner on the security team. "Have influence?" Elena looked at Dominic, who'd been silent throughout this exchange. He stepped forward slightly. "Elena has influence with me personally," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made people listen. "But not over employment decisions. Marcus handles all staffing issues, same as always. The only thing that's changed is my personal life. Your jobs, your security, your treatment, all of that remains exactly as it was. And if we have a problem with her," Sarah again, not backing down, "with this whole situation, then you address it professionally," Dominic said. "Same as you would any concern. But understand this. Elena is part of my life now. That's not up for debate or discussion. How you feel about it is your business, but it doesn't change the reality." It wasn't exactly a warm endorsement, but it was clear. The line had been drawn. The meeting wrapped up shortly after, with a few people asking practical questions about the transition timeline and the hiring process. Most just filed out quietly, probably saving their real opinions for private conversations later. When the room finally cleared, Elena sank into one of the dining chairs. "That was brutal." "You handled it well." Dominic sat beside her. "Better than I would have." "Sarah hates me now." "Sarah hates change. She'll adjust." Elena hoped he was right. She also hoped that this was the worst of it, that once people got used to the new normal, things would settle. But 2 days later, reality proved her optimism misplaced. She was in the library again. It had become her refuge, when she heard raised voices from the front hall. Dominic's voice, tight with controlled anger, and another voice she didn't recognize. Elena moved to the doorway and saw Dominic standing toe-to-toe with a man in an expensive suit. The stranger was roughly Dominic's height, maybe a few years older, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just saying, Dom, you should have given me a heads up." The man's tone was friendly, but there was steel underneath. "Finding out through the grapevine that you're shacking up with the help, it doesn't look good. How I conduct my personal life isn't your concern, Vincent." Vincent. The name clicked. Vincent Salvatore. The Chicago family. Dominic had mentioned, the ambitious, unstable son. "Everything you do is my concern when it affects our arrangement." Vincent's smile sharpened. "Your image matters. Credibility matters. And taking up with your house manager? That screams midlife crisis, not stable leadership." "My relationship with Elena has nothing to do with business." "Doesn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're getting soft, prioritizing personal feelings over strategic thinking." Vincent's eyes found Elena in the doorway. "Ah, speaking of..." Dominic shifted, positioning himself between Vincent and Elena. "Leave her out of this." "Can't do that. She's part of the equation now." Vincent stepped around Dominic with practiced ease, approaching Elena with his hand extended. "Vincent Salvatore, I don't think we've been properly introduced." Elena shook his hand because refusing would have been worse. His grip was firm, calculated, designed to establish dominance without being obvious about it. "Elena Brooks," she said evenly, "the famous Elena. I've heard quite a bit about you." His smile was all charm, all danger. "You must be very special to have caught Dominic's attention. He's not known for his romantic inclinations." "Vincent," Dominic's voice had gone ice cold. "We're done here." "Are we?" I came all this way to discuss the territory agreement, and you're dismissing me? We can discuss business in my office, like professionals. But this is so much more interesting. Vincent's attention stayed on Elena. Tell me, how does someone go from managing schedules to managing the man himself? That's quite a promotion. Elena felt Dominic tense beside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Vincent was testing them, looking for weaknesses. She couldn't afford to give him one. I don't manage Dominic, she said. We're partners. Partners? Vincent's laugh was patronizing. How modern! And what exactly do you bring to this partnership besides... He didn't get to finish. Dominic moved faster than Elena had ever seen him move, one hand gripping Vincent's shoulder hard enough to make the other man wince. Choose your next words very carefully, Dominic said quietly. Vincent's smile didn't fade, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Easy, friend. I'm just making conversation. No, you're trying to provoke me by disrespecting the woman I love. It's not going to work. The word, love, hung in the air between them. Vincent's eyebrows rose. Love? My, you really are in deep. He shrugged off Dominic's grip. Fine, business it is. Lead the way to your office and we'll talk about the shipping routes your people have been encroaching on. Dominic looked at Elena, and she saw the apology in his eyes. I need to handle this. I know, go. He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her forehead. A small gesture, but a public one. A claiming in front of Vincent that said she matters more than your opinion. When they disappeared toward the office wing, Elena stood alone in the hallway and felt the first real spike of fear. Not for herself exactly, but for what loving Dominic actually meant. The kind of people who would show up at the door. The kind of tests they'd face. Maria's words echoed back. You're playing with fire. Maybe she was, but she'd already jumped into the flames, and there was no going back now. She returned to the library and tried to read, but the words blurred together. 40 minutes later, she heard a car start in the drive. Vincent leaving, presumably. Then footsteps in the hall. Dominic appeared in the doorway, looking drained. Sorry about that. What did he want? Really? To rattle me. To see if having you in my life makes me vulnerable. Dominic crossed to where she sat and pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in his arms. He's going to be a problem. How big of a problem? I don't know yet, but he's not going to let this rest. Dominic's voice was grim. He sees weakness, and he'll exploit it. That's who he is. Elena pulled back to look at him. Am I your weakness? No, you're my strength. But he doesn't understand the difference. They stood there holding each other, and Elena realized that this was what loving Dominic would always look like. Moments of peace interrupted by threats, normalcy shattered by the reality of his world. She could either accept that or walk away. She tightened her arms around him, choosing acceptance. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The week after Vincent's visit, Elena learned what it meant to live under scrutiny. She felt eyes on her constantly, staff watching to see if she'd gotten too big for her position, Dominic's associates assessing whether she was a liability, even strangers at restaurants studying her with open curiosity when they recognized who she was with. The weight of it pressed down until she found herself second-guessing every word, every gesture, every choice of clothing. You're doing it again, Dominic said one evening. They were getting ready for dinner with one of his business partners, and Elena had changed outfits 3 times. Doing what? Trying to disappear. He came up behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. You wore that black dress the first time, the blue one the second time. Now you're back to black. What's wrong with both of them? They're too much, or not enough. I don't know. Elena stared at her reflection and saw a stranger, someone trying too hard to look like she belonged in Dominic's world. Who am I supposed to be at these things? Your girlfriend? Your former employee? Some weird hybrid that nobody knows how to talk to? You're supposed to be Elena. His hands tightened slightly. The woman I'm in love with, that's all. That's not helpful. Why not? Because nobody sees me that way. They see the house manager who got lucky, the staff member who slept her way into a better situation. She turned to face him. Don't pretend you haven't heard the whispers. Dominic's jaw tightened. I've heard them, and I've made it clear to anyone who matters that those comments aren't welcome. You can't control what people think. No, but I can control who I keep in my life. And anyone who disrespects you doesn't make the cut. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Wear the blue dress. You look beautiful in it. And stop trying to make yourself smaller to fit other people's comfort levels. Elena wanted to argue, but the certainty in his voice made something in her chest loosen. She changed back into the blue dress, let Dominic zip it up, and tried to silence the voice in her head that said she didn't deserve any of this. Dinner was at an upscale steakhouse downtown with Richard Chen, who ran one of the largest import businesses on the West Coast. He was in his 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, and he spent the first 20 minutes of the meal pretending Elena didn't exist while discussing shipping schedules and tariff regulations with Dominic. Elena picked at her food and tried not to feel like furniture. Then Richard's wife Diane arrived, apologizing for being late. A hospital board meeting had run over. She slid into the booth beside Richard, kissed his cheek, and immediately turned her attention to Elena. You must be the famous Elena. Richard's been dying to meet you, though he's too proud to admit it. Richard made a non-committal sound into his scotch. I'm not famous, Elena said. Just here. Just here and completely reshaping Dominic's entire existence, from what I hear. Diane smiled warmly. That's no small feat. This man's been married to his work for as long as we've known him. Diane, Richard warned. What? It's true. She turned back to Elena. How are you finding the transition? It must be strange going from managing his household to being part of his personal life. Finally, someone willing to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Elena felt some of her tension ease. It's been an adjustment, she admitted. I'm still figuring out where I fit. That's honest? I like honest. Diane ordered wine and settled in like she was planning to stay a while. When Richard and I got together, I was his secretary. The looks we got, the things people said, brutal. Especially since he was technically still married at the time, even though they'd been separated for 2 years. Diane, we don't need to... Richard started. Oh, hush. She needs to know she's not alone in this. Diane squeezed Elena's hand across the table. People are going to judge. They're going to make assumptions. Some of them will be cruel about it. But here's what I learned. Their opinions don't actually matter unless you let them. That's easier said than done, Elena said. True. But you know what helps? Remembering that the people who matter, the ones worth keeping around, they'll see you for who you are, not where you came from. Diane glanced at Dominic. He clearly sees you. That's what counts. Elena felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She'd been so focused on all the negative reactions that she hadn't stopped to consider there might be people who understood, who'd walked similar paths. The rest of dinner passed more easily. Diane kept the conversation flowing, drawing Elena out with questions about her interests, her background, carefully avoiding anything that felt like interrogation. By the time dessert arrived, Elena realized she was actually enjoying herself. When they finally said their goodbyes in the parking lot, Diane hugged her. You have my number now. Use it. Sometimes you need someone who gets it. In the car afterward, Dominic reached for Elena's hand. You did well tonight. Diane did most of the work. You held your own. That's what matters. He brought her hand to his lips. Richard told me privately that he approves. Coming from him, that's significant. Elena leaned her head back against the seat. Does it ever get easier? Needing approval from people you barely know? Eventually you stop caring about the approval and start trusting your own judgment. His thumb traced circles on her palm. We're not there yet, but we'll get there. The we made all the difference. But 2 days later, the fragile equilibrium shattered. Elena was having coffee in the kitchen with Maria. Their relationship had thawed to something approaching friendliness, when Adrian appeared in the doorway. He looked tense, his usual easy demeanor replaced with something harder. Is Dominic here? He asked without preamble. In his office. Wepa, we have a problem. Adrian's eyes flicked to Maria. A big one. Maria took the hint and excused herself. Adrian waited until she was gone before continuing. Vincent Salvatore just made a move on our territory. 2 of our distribution centers got hit overnight, inventory stolen, security guards roughed up. Nothing fatal, but the message is clear. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. He's starting a war. Looks that way. And the timing isn't coincidental. Adrian's expression was grim. He's testing Dominic, seeing if being with you has made him soft. That's insane. That's the world we live in. Adrian moved toward the hallway. I need to brief Dominic. You should stay out of the way for the next few hours. Things are about to get intense. He left, and Elena sat alone in the kitchen with her coffee going cold and her heart hammering. This was her fault. Not directly, but the chain of causation was clear. She and Dominic got together. Vincent saw an opening. Now people were getting hurt. She wanted to talk to Dominic, but Adrian's warning kept her away. Instead, she retreated to the library and tried to read while the sounds of urgent activity filtered through the house. Phones ringing, voices and terse conversation, car engines in the drive as people arrived for emergency meetings. Hours passed. The sun set. Elena considered going to bed but couldn't bring herself to leave without seeing Dominic first. It was nearly midnight when he finally appeared in the library doorway. He looked exhausted, his shirt rumpled and his tie long since abandoned. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you." Elena set down her book. "How bad is it?" Dominic crossed to the bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. "Bad enough. Vincent's making his play. He thinks I'm distracted, vulnerable. He wants to force me to choose between holding territory and holding on to you." "What are you going to do?" "Hold both." He drank half the scotch in one swallow. "I've got people securing our operations, reaching out to our allies, making it clear that this aggression won't be tolerated. By tomorrow, Vincent will understand he miscalculated. And if he doesn't back down?" Dominic's silence was answer enough. Elena stood and went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. She felt the tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing had gone shallow with stress. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his back. "For what?" "For being the excuse he's using, for making you vulnerable." Dominic turned in her arms, his hands framing her face. "You didn't make me vulnerable. You made me human. There's a difference." His kiss was fierce, almost desperate. "Don't apologize for that. Don't ever apologize for that. People got hurt because of us. People got hurt because Vincent is an ambitious bastard looking for any opening. If it wasn't you, it would have been something else." He rested his forehead against hers. "This isn't on you, Elena. This is the world I live in, the world I've always lived in." "Then maybe I shouldn't be part of it." The words hung between them, terrible and honest. Dominic went very still. "Is that what you want?" His voice was carefully controlled. "To leave? No. But I don't want to be the reason people get hurt either." "You're not. Vincent is the reason. His choice, his actions, his consequences." Dominic's grip on her face tightened slightly. "But I need to know, are you having second thoughts? About us?" Elena looked into his eyes and saw fear there. Real fear that she might walk away, that this might be too much for her to handle. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but I'm not leaving." The relief that flooded his expression made her chest ache. He pulled her close, and they stood there in the quiet library while the world outside continued its violent machinations. "I have to go to Chicago tomorrow," Dominic said into her hair. "Face-to-face meeting with Vincent. It's the only way to resolve this before it escalates further." "Is that safe?" "Safe enough. It's neutral territory, third-party mediation. The old rules still apply." "I'm coming with you." Dominic pulled back to look at her. "Absolutely not." "You don't get to make that decision for me. Elena, this is business, dangerous business. You don't belong anywhere near it." "I belong with you." She met his eyes steadily. "You said I was your strength, not your weakness. Prove it. Let me stand beside you instead of hiding me away." "It's not about hiding." "Yes, it is. You want to keep me separate from the difficult parts of your life. But that's not how partnership works." Her hands fisted in his shirt. "I'm either in this completely or I'm not. You don't get to pick and choose which parts of your world I'm allowed to see." Dominic's jaw worked. She could see him fighting between the instinct to protect her and the recognition that she was right. "If something happened to you," he started, "then we deal with it together." Elena softened her voice. "I'm not asking to be in the room for your negotiation, but I can be there, in Chicago, supporting you, showing Vincent and everyone else that we're a united front." "It's a terrible idea." "Probably. But so was falling in love with you, and I did it anyway." That pulled a rough laugh from him. "You're impossible. I learned from the best." He kissed her again, and this time there was resignation in it along with the heat. "Fine. But you follow every instruction I give you. No arguments. I already promised that. I'm serious, Elena. This isn't a game. These people, Vincent and his associates, they don't care about fairness or mercy. If they see an opening, they'll take it. I understand. Dominic didn't look convinced, but he nodded. We leave tomorrow afternoon. Pack light and professional. This isn't a vacation. They went upstairs together, but neither of them slept much. Elena could feel Dominic's mind working beside her, strategizing, calculating, preparing for whatever tomorrow would bring. She tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Morning came too quickly. Elena packed a small bag while Dominic made calls and finalized arrangements. Adrian would be coming with them along with 2 security guards. Marcus would stay behind to manage operations. The flight to Chicago was tense and quiet. Dominic worked on his laptop while Adrian briefed him on the latest intelligence. The security guards sat stone-faced, watching everything. Elena stared out the window at clouds and tried to quiet her racing heart. They landed at a private airfield and were met by a black car that drove them to a hotel downtown, the kind of place that catered to people who valued discretion over flash. Their suite was elegant but austere, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The meeting's at 7, Dominic told her once they were alone, at a restaurant called Marino's. I'll be gone for 2, maybe 3 hours. And I stay here. You stay here with one of the security guards. Door stays locked. You don't answer for anyone except me or Adrian. Elena wanted to argue but remembered her promise. Okay. Dominic pulled her close and she felt the tension radiating through his body. I know this isn't what you signed up for. Yes, it is. She looked up at him. I knew who you were when I fell in love with you. Maybe I didn't understand all the details, but I knew enough. You knew the sanitized version, the business meetings and contracts and normal operations. His hand cupped her face. What's happening now, this is the ugly part. The part I wanted to keep you away from. Too late. I'm here now. She turned her head and kissed his palm. Go do what you need to do. I'll be fine. He kissed her once more, hard and desperate, then left with Adrian and one of the guards. The remaining guard, a man named Thomas, who Elena had seen around the estate but never really spoken to, positioned himself outside the suite door. Elena tried to read but couldn't focus, tried to watch television, but the noise felt invasive. Finally, she just stood at the window watching the city lights and waiting. 7 o'clock came and went, then 8, then 9. Elena's phone stayed silent. No updates, no reassurances, nothing. At 9:30, there was a knock at the door. Elena froze. Dominic had said not to answer for anyone except him or Adrian. But what if something had happened? What if he was hurt and they needed to get to him? Miss Brooks? Thomas's voice muffled through the door. You need to open up. Something in his tone was wrong. Too formal. Too careful. Where's Dominic? She called back. There's been a situation. I need you to come with me. Elena's heart hammered. What kind of situation? Mr. Moretti asked me to bring you to him. Please open the door. Every instinct screamed at her not to. Dominic had been specific. Don't open the door for anyone except him or Adrian. Thomas wasn't on that list. Call Dominic, she said. Have him tell me himself. Silence. Then Thomas's voice again, harder now. Miss Brooks, I don't have time for this. Open the door. Elena backed away from the door, her phone already in her hand. She dialed Dominic's number with shaking fingers. It rang once before connecting. Elena? What's wrong? Relief flooded through her so intensely she almost couldn't speak. Thomas is outside the door. He says there's been a situation and I need to come with him. Don't open that door. Dominic's voice went arctic. Adrian, get to the hotel now. Elena, listen to me very carefully. The door exploded inward. Elena screamed and dropped the phone as Thomas came through, no longer bothering with pretense. Behind him were 2 men she didn't recognize, both armed. Sorry about this, Thomas said, and he actually sounded apologetic. Vincent's paying better than Moretti. Nothing personal. One of the men grabbed Elena before she could run. She fought, kicking and clawing, but he was twice her size and knew what he was doing. A hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off her screams. She heard Dominic's voice shouting from the dropped phone, heard footsteps pounding in the hallway, but then something sharp pricked her neck and the world started to blur. Her last coherent thought before darkness took her was that she'd been so stupid, so naive. Dominic had warned her, had tried to protect her, and she'd insisted on coming anyway. Now she was going to pay for that mistake. When Elena woke, everything hurt. Her head throbbed, her neck ached where they'd injected her, and her wrists burned from whatever they'd used to bind them behind her back. She was sitting in a chair in what looked like a warehouse, concrete floors, metal walls, the smell of oil and rust. Across from her sat Vincent Salvatore, looking perfectly comfortable in his expensive suit. "Good, you're awake," he said pleasantly. "I was starting to worry they'd given you too much sedative." Elena's mouth was dry, her tongue thick. "Where am I?" "Somewhere your boyfriend won't find you quickly, though I'm sure he's looking." Vincent smiled. "That's rather the point, actually. What do you want?" "What I've always wanted, leverage." Vincent leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Dominic thinks he can ignore the old ways, the old alliances. He thinks he can build his little empire and keep everyone else at arm's length. But he forgot something important. "What's that?" "Everyone has weaknesses. Everyone has something they value more than power." Vincent's smile widened. For Dominic, apparently, that something is you. Elena's heart hammered, but she forced herself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help. "He won't negotiate with you. Not over me." "Won't he? I think you underestimate how much he cares." Vincent pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yes, we have her." "No, she's fine. Completely unharmed." A pause. "Of course I'm willing to trade. You know my terms." He ended the call and looked at Elena with something almost like sympathy. "He's quite upset. Very unlike the Dominic Moretti I know." "You really have gotten under his skin, haven't you?" "If you hurt me, he'll destroy you." "Oh, I'm not going to hurt you. That would defeat the purpose." Vincent stood and began pacing. "See, I don't actually care about territory or shipping routes or any of the business nonsense we've been fighting over. What I care about is proving a point." "What point?" "That love makes you weak. That attachment is vulnerability. That Dominic's father was right to keep everyone at a distance." Vincent stopped in front of her. "Your boyfriend could have been great, truly great, but now he's hobbled himself with feelings. With you." "You're insane. I'm realistic, and I'm about to teach Dominic a very valuable lesson about the cost of caring." He checked his watch. "He has 1 hour to meet my terms. If he doesn't, I don't hurt you. I just keep you, permanently. You disappear, and he spends the rest of his life wondering if you're alive or dead, if you're suffering or comfortable, if you're thinking about him, or if you've forgotten he exists." The cruelty of it took Elena's breath away. Not violence, but sustained psychological torture. For both of them. "He won't give you what you want," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "Then I guess we'll find out just how much you mean to him, won't we?" Vincent left her alone after that, guarded by 2 armed men who didn't speak or react to anything she said. Elena tested the restraints on her wrists, but they were secure. Her phone was gone, her shoes were missing, and she had no idea where in Chicago she was or how to get help even if she could escape. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, she let herself feel the full weight of fear. Not just for herself, but for what this would do to Dominic. The choice Vincent was forcing him to make, his empire or her life. Time crawled. Elena had no way to track it, but it felt like hours passed before she heard car engines outside, doors slamming, voices raised in argument. Then the warehouse door opened and Dominic walked in. He looked like hell. Hair disheveled, shirt untucked, blood on his knuckles from something that had happened before he got here. But his eyes when they found her were fierce and focused and filled with something that might have been relief or might have been rage. Vincent appeared from wherever he'd been waiting, all smiles. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality." Dominic didn't look at him. His entire attention was on Elena, visually checking her for injuries, for signs of harm. She tried to communicate through eye contact that she was okay, that she was still here, still whole. "Let her go," Dominic said, his voice flat and dangerous. "Of course, once we conclude our business." Vincent gestured to one of his men, who produced a folder. "These are the territory concessions I mentioned. Sign them, and she walks out of here with you." "Those concessions would cripple my operations." "Yes, but she'd be alive and safe. Seems like a fair trade to me." Dominic's jaw worked. Elena could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. weighing costs, measuring consequences, trying to find a third option that didn't exist. Don't, Elena said. Dominic, don't sign anything for me. Elena, I mean it. This is exactly what he wants, to prove you're weak, to take everything you've built. She held his gaze. I'm not worth that. Yes, you are. The certainty in his voice broke something in her chest. How touching, Vincent said. But I'm afraid sentiment doesn't pay the bills. What's it going to be, Dominic? Your empire or your girl? The silence stretched unbearable. Elena watched Dominic's face and saw the moment he made his choice. He reached for the folder. And that's when all hell broke loose. The warehouse door exploded inward for the second time that night. This time with Adrian leading the charge and a team of armed men behind him. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Elena threw herself sideways, chair and all, hitting the concrete hard enough to make her vision blur. Through the chaos, she saw Dominic moving, not toward the door or safety, but toward her. He had a gun in his hand. When had he drawn a gun? And he was using it, laying down covering fire while he crossed the distance between them. Someone screamed. More gunfire. The smell of smoke and cordite. Then Dominic was there, cutting through her restraints with a knife, hauling her to her feet, his body between her and the fight. Can you run? He shouted over the noise. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. They ran. Adrian and his team kept Vincent's men pinned while Dominic half-carried, half-dragged Elena toward a side exit. They burst out into an alley where more cars waited, engines running. Dominic shoved her into the back seat and threw himself in after her. Drive! The car peeled out, tires screaming, while behind them the sounds of the firefight continued. Elena couldn't process what had just happened. Her ears were ringing, her wrists were bleeding from the restraints, and her entire body was shaking with adrenaline. Dominic pulled her against him, one hand cradling the back of her head. I've got you. You're safe. I've got you. How did you? Thomas's phone had GPS. We tracked it to the warehouse. His voice was rough, shaken. If we'd been 5 minutes later. But you weren't. Elena pressed closer to him, needing the solid reality of his body. You came for me. Of course I came for you. Did you really think I wouldn't? She'd hoped. But hope and certainty were different things, and somewhere in that warehouse, tied up and helpless, she'd started to doubt. I'm sorry, she said. You were right. I shouldn't have come to Chicago. I should have listened. Stop. Dominic tilted her face up. This isn't your fault. None of it. Vincent would have found another way to get to you regardless. But no buts. You're alive. That's all that matters. The car drove them straight to the airfield where Dominic's plane waited. Adrian and the team arrived 20 minutes later, looking rougher, but intact. No one spoke during the flight home. There was nothing to say that mattered more than the fact that they'd all survived. It was dawn when they finally made it back to the estate. Elena's legs barely worked as Dominic helped her upstairs. He ran her a bath and helped her out of her torn, dirty clothes with hands that shook slightly. She noticed, but didn't comment. He needed this, needed to care for her, to assure himself she was really here and whole. She soaked in hot water while he sat on the bathroom floor beside the tub, one hand trailing in the water to maintain contact. Neither of them spoke. There would be time for words later, for processing and planning and dealing with the aftermath. For now, this was enough. Being alive, being together. When the water started to cool, Dominic helped her out and wrapped her in towels and held her while she finally let herself cry. Not delicate tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and terrified. He held her through all of it, murmuring reassurances that she couldn't quite hear over her own ragged breathing. Eventually, the tears stopped. Elena felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. Dominic carried her to bed and climbed in beside her, keeping her tucked against his chest like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. I thought I lost you, he said into the darkness. When Thomas came through that door and you weren't there. But I am here. This time. But what about next time? His arms tightened. Vincent's not going to stop. And now that he knows how much you mean to me, he'll keep using you as leverage. So what do we do? Dominic was quiet for a long time. We end it. Permanently. Elena went cold. What does that mean? It means I'm done playing by the old rules. Done trying to maintain peace with people who see mercy as weakness. His voice had gone hard, cold. Vincent declared war tonight. I'm going to finish it. Dominic, no more halfway, remember? That applies to this too. I can't protect you and run my organization and maintain the status quo all at once. Something has to give. Elena pushed herself up to look at him. What are you planning? Nothing you need to know the details of. But by the end of the week, Vincent Salvatore won't be a problem anymore. The finality in his voice told her everything she needed to know about what that meant. She should have been horrified, should have argued, pushed back, insisted there had to be another way. Instead, she just nodded and let him pull her back down against his chest. Because the truth was simple and terrible. She was tired of being afraid. Tired of looking over her shoulder, of wondering when the next threat would come. If Dominic ending this permanently meant they could finally have peace, then she'd learn to live with whatever that took. They'd both already crossed too many lines to pretend moral high ground mattered anymore. All that mattered was survival. And each other. Elena woke to voices downstairs, low, urgent, the kind of conversation that happened behind closed doors. She reached for Dominic but found only empty sheets, still warm from where he'd been lying beside her. The clock read just past noon. They'd slept maybe 4 hours. She forced herself out of bed, every muscle protesting. Her wrists were bandaged. Dominic must have done that while she slept. And bruises were blooming purple across her arms, where Vincent's men had grabbed her. Physical evidence of a night she'd rather forget, but knew she never would. She found clean clothes in the closet, her clothes, which someone had moved from her old room during the chaos of the past week. The small domesticity of it made her throat tight. Even in the middle of a war, Dominic had made sure she had what she needed. Downstairs, she followed the voices to Dominic's office. The door was partially open, and through the gap she could see him standing behind his desk with Adrian, Marcus, and 3 other men she recognized as senior members of his organization. The Salvatores have connections in New York and Miami, Marcus was saying, pointing at something on a laptop screen. If we move on Vincent directly, they'll retaliate through those channels. Then we cut those channels first. Dominic's voice was ice cold, all business. Adrian, I need you to reach out to the Castellanos. They've been wanting to expand into Miami for years. Offer them Vincent's territory in exchange for staying neutral. They'll want guarantees, Adrian said. They'll get them. In writing, witnessed by the commission if necessary. Dominic's hand moved across the desk, rearranging papers like chess pieces. What about the Chicago operations? Vincent's second in command is his cousin Leo, loyal but not stupid. This from one of the other men, someone Elena didn't know. Word is Leo's been frustrated with Vincent's recklessness, might be willing to negotiate a transition of power, set up a meeting, neutral ground, full security protocols. Dominic looked up and saw Elena in the doorway. His expression softened immediately. Give us a minute. The room cleared without argument. Adrian squeezed Elena's shoulder as he passed, his expression concerned but not pitying. She appreciated that. When they were alone, Dominic came around the desk and pulled her into his arms. You should still be sleeping. So should you. Can't. Too much to coordinate. He kissed the top of her head. How are you feeling? Like I got kidnapped and nearly started a gang war. She pulled back to look at him. How's it really going? Better than expected. Vincent overplayed his hand. His own people are questioning his judgment, and our allies are making it clear they won't support him in a prolonged conflict. Dominic's thumb traced her cheekbone, careful to avoid the small cut there. It'll be over soon. What does over mean? He hesitated, and she saw him weighing how much truth to give her. It means Vincent will no longer be in a position to threaten us. The specifics, I don't need the specifics. Elena surprised herself with the words. A week ago, she would have demanded details, insisted on transparency. Now she just needed to know they'd be safe. I trust you to handle it. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, relief mixed with something heavier. You shouldn't have to live like this. Looking over your shoulder, wondering when the next threat will come. But I do live like this. Because I love you. She took his hand, the one with bloodied knuckles from last night. And you live with it because this is your world. We don't get to pick and choose the easy parts. I could walk away from all of it. The words came out rough, like they'd been building for a while. Sell my interests, retire somewhere quiet. We could have a normal life. Elena studied his face and saw the truth underneath the offer. You'd hate it. Within 6 months, you'd be climbing the walls, missing the work, resenting me for making you give it up. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because you're good at this. You built something from the ashes of your father's mistakes. You've kept peace, maintained order, protected people who depend on you. She touched his face. I didn't fall in love with you despite who you are. I fell in love with you because of who you are. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. Even after last night, after seeing what this world actually looks like, especially after last night, you came for me. You put everything on the line to get me back. Her voice wavered. That's not something I take lightly. He kissed her then, desperate and deep, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. I need to finish this, he said quietly. The next few days are going to be intense. Meetings, negotiations, possibly some things I can't tell you about. I need you to stay here, stay safe, and trust that I'm doing what needs to be done. I can do that. And when it's over, he paused. When it's over, we're going to talk about the future, about what comes next for us. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. What do you mean? I mean, I'm tired of halfway. I want you in my life permanently, completely, in every way that matters. His hands framed her face. But we'll talk about specifics later, after Vincent is handled. He kissed her once more and returned to his war room. Elena stood in the hallway and tried to process what he'd just implied. Permanently, completely, in every way that matters. Was he talking about marriage? The thought should have terrified her. They'd been together barely 2 weeks, and most of that time had been consumed by crisis and conflict. Normal couples dated for years before making that kind of commitment. But nothing about them was normal. And Elena found she wasn't terrified at all. The next 3 days passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Dominic was gone more than he was home, returning late and leaving early, always with Adrian or Marcus or both. Elena tried to stay out of the way, but the isolation was suffocating. She couldn't leave the estate, too dangerous. Couldn't involve herself in Dominic's business, too complicated. Couldn't even talk to most of the staff without feeling the weight of everything that had changed. She spent hours in the library reading the same pages over and over without retaining anything. Diane Chen called twice to check on her, somehow having heard through the grapevine what had happened. Their conversations helped, even if Elena couldn't share most of the details. He's trying to protect you, Diane said during the second call. Men like Dominic and Richard, they compartmentalize. Business in one box, personal life in another. They think they're shielding us when really they're just making us feel excluded. How do you handle it? I stopped waiting for permission to be involved. Richard has his world, I have mine, and we overlap where it makes sense. But I don't sit around the house waiting for him to come home and tell me what's happening. I build my own life. It was good advice, even if Elena wasn't sure how to apply it yet. What life was she supposed to build while Dominic dismantled Vincent's organization piece by piece? On the 4th day, Dominic came home at a reasonable hour for the first time all week. He looked exhausted but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. It's done, he said, pulling Elena into his arms. Vincent's out. His cousin Leo is taking over Chicago operations with our blessing. The territorial disputes are settled. It's over. Elena felt something unknot in her chest. Vincent just agreed to step down? He was given a choice. Step down voluntarily with a generous retirement package, or be removed by force with nothing. Dominic's expression was carefully neutral. He chose retirement. He's relocating to Europe, effective immediately. Part of the agreement is that he never returns to the United States. And you trust him to honor that? I trust that he understands the consequences if he doesn't. There was steel underneath the words. He won't be a problem again. Elena wanted to ask more questions. How Dominic had convinced Vincent, what leverage had been used, whether money or threats or something worse had sealed the deal. But she remembered her promise. Trust him to handle it. Okay, she said simply. Dominic pulled back to look at her, surprise flickering across his face. That's it? No interrogation? You said it's handled. I believe you. He studied her for a long moment, and she watched something in his expression shift. Not relief exactly, but recognition. She'd crossed some invisible threshold, accepted something fundamental about who he was and how his world worked. "I love you," he said, the words raw and honest. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to understand. I've never felt this way about anyone, never trusted anyone the way I trust you." "I love you too." Elena went up on her toes and kissed him. "Now, can we please have one normal evening? No crises, no threats, no emergency meetings?" "I can do that." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "What did you have in mind?" "Dinner, conversation, maybe a movie, aggressively mundane activities." They ordered pizza, Dominic's choice, which surprised her until he admitted he almost never got to eat pizza because it wasn't appropriate for business dinners. They ate on the terrace while the sun set, talking about nothing important, books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, the merits of different pizza toppings. Normal couple conversation, the kind they'd never really had time for before. After dinner, they ended up in the screening room, a space Elena had cleaned 100 times but never actually used. Dominic let her pick the movie, and she chose something light and silly, the kind of romantic comedy that required zero brainpower to follow. Halfway through, she realized Dominic had fallen asleep, his head on her shoulder and his breathing deep and even. She didn't wake him. He'd probably barely slept in days, running on coffee and adrenaline and sheer stubbornness. She stayed still and let him rest, feeling the solid weight of him against her side and thinking about how much had changed in 2 weeks. How her entire life had been reorganized around this man, this relationship, this dangerous and complicated love. She should have regrets, should be questioning her choices, wondering if she'd moved too fast or sacrificed too much. But sitting there in the dark with Dominic sleeping beside her, Elena felt nothing but certainty. This was where she belonged. With him, whatever that meant. When the movie ended, she woke him gently. He blinked up at her, momentarily disoriented, then smiled in a way that made her heart squeeze. "Sorry, I'm terrible company." "You're perfect company." She stood and offered her hand. "Come on." Real bed, actual sleep. They made their way upstairs, and for the first time in days, they both slept through the night without nightmares or interruptions. Morning brought a return to routine. Dominic had meetings, but nothing urgent. Elena finally felt brave enough to venture into other parts of the house, to reclaim some sense of normalcy. She found Maria in the kitchen, as usual, and the older woman's expression softened when she saw her. "You look better," Maria said. "Less like you're about to shatter." "I feel better, mostly." Elena poured herself coffee. "Things are settling. So I heard. Staff's been talking about how Mr. Moretti handled the Chicago situation. Impressed, mostly. He's earned a lot of loyalty this week. He's good at what he does. And you're good for him." Maria's voice was firm. "I was wrong before. About you leaving us behind. You didn't abandon anyone. You just found something that mattered more." The apology, unexpected and genuine, made Elena's eyes sting. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I'm still not convinced this will work long term, but," Maria shrugged, "I'm willing to be proven wrong." It was the closest thing to a blessing Elena was likely to get, and she'd take it. The rest of the week passed quietly. Dominic was still busy, but less frantically so. The new house manager started, a competent woman in her 40s named Patricia, who'd managed estates for wealthy families for years. She had no interest in drama or gossip, just wanted to do her job well and go home to her own life at the end of the day. Elena helped with this transition, showing Patricia the quirks of the house and introducing her to the staff. It was strange handing over responsibilities she'd held for 3 years, but also liberating. She'd been so defined by that role, by being useful and necessary, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist without a job title attached. On Saturday morning, Dominic woke her early with coffee and a smile. "Get dressed," he said. "Something nice but comfortable. We're going out." "Where?" "You'll see." She knew better than to push for details. Dominic liked surprises, liked orchestrating experiences. She dressed in a simple sundress and sandals and let him lead her to the car. They drove out of the city, into the hills where expensive houses gave way to open land and scattered estates. After about 40 minutes, Dominic turned onto a private road that wound through trees and ended at a gate. Beyond the gate was a house, not a mansion like the Moretti estate, but something smaller and infinitely more charming. stone and wood and glass, designed to blend with the landscape rather than dominate it. There were gardens, a small pond, trees that filtered sunlight into dappled patterns across the ground. "What is this?" Elena asked as Dominic punched in a code and the gate swung open. "Possibility." He drove through and parked in front of the house. "Come on, I want to show you inside." The interior was even better than the exterior. Open floor plans, high ceilings, windows everywhere. The furniture was minimal but elegant, and everything felt warm and lived in despite clearly being vacant. "It's beautiful," Elena said, running her hand along a kitchen counter. "Who owns it?" "I do. Bought it 3 years ago as an investment property. Never did anything with it." Dominic leaned against the counter, watching her explore. "I've been thinking about what you said, about me hating a quiet life, resenting giving up my work." "Dominic, let me finish." He took her hand. "You were right. I can't just walk away from the organization. It's part of who I am. But that doesn't mean we have to live in that world 24/7. Elena's heart started to pound. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this could be ours. A place away from the estate, from the business, from all of it. Somewhere we come when we need to remember what we're working for." He pulled her closer. "Somewhere to build a life that's about more than territory and negotiations and staying 3 steps ahead of threats." "You want us to live here? Part-time at least. The estate for work. This place for us?" His hands framed her face. "I know it's fast. I know we've barely had time to breathe between crises, but I also know that I want to build a future with you, Elena. Not someday, not eventually. Now." She couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just nodded. Dominic's smile was brilliant and a little nervous. "There's something else. Come upstairs." He led her to the master bedroom, which was spacious and bright with a balcony overlooking the gardens. In the center of the room was a small table, and on the table was a ring box. Elena's breath stopped. Dominic picked up the box and opened it, revealing a diamond ring that was beautiful without being ostentatious. Simple, elegant, perfect. "I had a whole speech planned," he said, and his hands were actually shaking, "about how you changed everything, how you made me want things I'd given up on. But standing here, all I can think to say is, I love you. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" Elena looked at the ring, at Dominic's face, at the future suddenly spreading out before them. 2 weeks ago, she'd been his house manager, invisible and careful and alone. Now she was standing in a beautiful house with the man she loved asking her to be his wife. It was insane, impulsive, completely irrational. "Yes," she said, and started crying. "Yes, of course, yes." Dominic slipped the ring on her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried into his shoulder. Happy tears this time, overwhelmed tears, tears of relief that this was real and happening and hers to keep. "I was terrified you'd say no," he admitted, "that it was too fast, too much. It is too fast and too much." Elena pulled back to look at him. "And I don't care. I've spent 3 years being careful and measured and appropriate. I'm done with that. I want this. I want you." He kissed her, and it tasted like promises and possibility and all the futures they'd get to build together. They spent the rest of the day at the house, talking about plans and timelines. Dominic wanted a small wedding, immediate family, and close friends only. Elena barely had any family left. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and she'd lost touch with most extended relatives. But Diane and Richard would come. Adrian, some of the staff she'd grown close to. "When?" she asked, still turning the ring on her finger, unable to stop looking at it. "Soon as you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I'll wait as long as you need." "Next month," Elena decided. "I don't want to wait. I don't want to give the universe time to throw another crisis at us before we make it official." Dominic laughed. "Next month it is." They drove back to the estate as the sun was setting, and Elena felt different than she had on the drive out. Not just engaged, but settled. Like a piece of herself she hadn't realized was missing had finally clicked into place. When they walked in, they found Adrian waiting in the main hall. His expression was carefully neutral, which immediately put Elena on alert. "We have a situation," he said without preamble. Dominic's whole demeanor shifted. "What kind of situation?" "The kind you're going to want to handle personally." Adrian's eyes flicked to Elena, then back to Dominic. It's about your father. Elena felt Dominic go rigid beside her. In all their conversations, all their confessions, he'd barely mentioned his father beyond the basic facts. The man had died when Dominic was 18, killed by his own organization. That was all she knew. What about him? Dominic's voice was carefully controlled. Someone's been asking questions, digging into old records, talking to people who were there when he died, looking for proof that it wasn't an internal hit. It was an internal hit. I was there. I know. But apparently someone thinks there's more to the story. Adrian shifted his weight. The person asking questions is a journalist. She's been working on a book about organized crime families, and your father's death is a chapter she wants to verify. Tell her to fuck off. I tried. She's persistent, and she has enough legitimate sources that shutting her down completely could draw more attention than just cooperating minimally. Dominic's hand found Elena's, gripping tight. What does she want? An interview. One conversation about what you remember from that night. She's promising discretion, fact-checking only, nothing that would put you or the organization at risk. Absolutely not. I figured you'd say that, but Adrian hesitated. She mentioned she has documents, letters your father wrote before he died. She's willing to share them in exchange for the interview. The silence that followed was heavy and complicated. Elena squeezed Dominic's hand, wishing she understood the significance of those letters, why they mattered enough to make him consider talking to a journalist. I need to think about it, Dominic finally said. She's only in town until Wednesday. Then I'll think fast. He turned to Elena. I'm sorry. I know we were supposed to celebrate tonight. It's okay. She touched his face. Handle what you need to handle. I'll be here. He kissed her forehead and disappeared toward his office with Adrian. Elena stood alone in the hallway with her engagement ring catching the light and a familiar sense of whiplash settling over her. This was going to be their life. Moments of joy interrupted by complications, plans derailed by the past, celebrating in the spaces between crises. She could either resent it or accept it. Elena looked down at her ring and chose acceptance. An hour later, she found Dominic in his office, staring at nothing with a glass of scotch untouched on the desk beside him. Talk to me, she said from the doorway. He looked up, and the expression on his face was younger somehow, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. My father wasn't a good man, he said quietly, but he was my father. And the last time I saw him alive, we fought, badly. I said things I can never take back. Elena crossed to him and settled in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. What did you fight about? He wanted me to take over the organization immediately. I was 18 and stupid and thought I knew better. I told him he was reckless, that his decisions were going to get people killed, that I didn't want any part of his legacy. Dominic's voice cracked. 3 days later, he was dead, killed by men who thought exactly what I'd said, that he was a liability. That's not your fault, isn't it? If I'd backed him up, shown a united front, maybe they wouldn't have made their move. Maybe nothing. Elena's hands framed his face, forcing him to look at her. You were a kid. Whatever happened, whatever your father's people decided, that was on them, not you. The letters Adrian mentioned, they're from the week before he died. I never knew they existed, and I'm terrified to read them because what if... He stopped. What if he hated me at the end? What if his last thoughts were about how his son betrayed him? Or what if they weren't? Elena said softly. What if he understood? What if he wanted you to know something important? Dominic closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I don't know if I'm strong enough to find out. You are. And I'll be right beside you when you do. They sat there in the quiet office while Dominic wrestled with ghosts and Elena held him through it. Eventually, he made his decision. Set up the interview, he told Adrian via text. But Elena comes with me, non-negotiable. The response came back immediately. Understood. Elena didn't argue about being included. She was done standing on the sidelines while Dominic faced his demons alone. Whatever those letters contained, whatever truths or accusations or final words his father had left behind, they'd face them together. Because that's what partnership meant. Not just sharing the good moments, but standing firm through the difficult ones. And as Elena sat in Dominic's lap with her engagement ring catching the lamplight, and his arms wrapped tight around her, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The past could keep its secrets or reveal them. The future could throw whatever challenges it wanted their way. None of it mattered as much as this, the two of them together, choosing each other despite everything the world demanded. That was enough. That was everything. The journalist's name was Rebecca Marsh, and she met them at a cafe downtown on Tuesday afternoon. She was younger than Elena expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp eyes and a recorder she set on the table between them without asking permission. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said, directing her attention to Dominic. "I know it wasn't an easy decision." "Let's skip the pleasantries." Dominic's voice was flat. "You have letters. I want to see them before we talk about anything." Rebecca didn't argue. She pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. "There are 4, all written in the week before your father died. 3 are addressed to associates, instructions for after his death. The 4th is addressed to you." Dominic's hand hesitated over the folder. Elena could see the war happening behind his eyes, the desperate need to know versus the fear of what he might find. She touched his arm gently, a silent reminder that she was there. He opened the folder. The first 3 letters were exactly what Rebecca had described: business instructions, final arrangements, the practical details of a man who knew his time was running out. Dominic scanned them quickly, his expression unreadable. Then he reached the 4th letter. Elena watched his face as he read, watched the careful controls start to fracture. His jaw tightened, his breathing went shallow. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Can I—" His voice cracked. "Can I have a minute?" "Of course." Rebecca stood. "I'll get coffee. Take your time." When she was gone, Dominic handed Elena the letter with shaking hands. She read it slowly, feeling her own eyes start to burn. "Dominic, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're about to inherit a mess. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. You were right about me. Everything you said in our last fight, I was reckless. I did put people at risk. I let grief over your mother turn me into someone I never wanted to be. You saw that clearly when I couldn't see it myself. I know you think you disappointed me. You didn't. You reminded me of the man I used to be before I let anger and revenge consume everything good. You reminded me that this organization was supposed to protect people, not just accumulate power. By the time you read this, things will have changed. I've made arrangements to step down, to hand control to the council until you're ready to take over properly. Not at 18 with no preparation, but when you've had time to learn, to build your own vision. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know you were never the failure. I was. And if you can do better than I did, build something cleaner and smarter, then maybe my mistakes will have meant something. Be the leader I should have been. And don't let this life cost you the things that matter. Don't make my mistakes. Love always, Dad." Elena set the letter down with trembling hands. "Dominic." He was going to step down. Dominic's voice was rough, broken. He was going to fix things, and they killed him before he could. And I've spent 20 years thinking he died hating me. He didn't hate you. He was proud of you. I never knew. Dominic scrubbed his hands over his face. I built my entire life around not being him, around doing everything differently, and I never knew he wanted the same thing. Elena took his hands, gripping tight. He knew you'd do better, and you have. Everything you've built, the way you run things. It's exactly what he was asking for. Rebecca returned with coffee, her expression professionally sympathetic. She'd probably seen people break down over documents before. "I'm sorry. I know that's difficult to process." Dominic pulled himself together with visible effort. "Why did you have these? How did you get them?" "They were in a safety deposit box registered to your father's attorney. When he died last year, the box's contents were transferred to his firm's archives. I was researching your father's death for my book and got access to the files." Rebecca set down her coffee. "The letters were never sent because your father died 2 days after writing them. But I thought you deserved to know what he wanted to say. At the cost of an interview. I'm a journalist. Information is currency." She didn't apologize for it. "But yes, I'd like to ask you about that night. What you remember, what you think happened, not for sensationalism, for accuracy." Dominic looked at Elena, silently asking her opinion. She nodded. He'd come this far. Might as well finish it. What do you want to know? He asked. For the next hour, Rebecca asked careful questions, and Dominic answered with more honesty than Elena had expected. He talked about the tension in the organization leading up to his father's death, about the factions that had formed, about walking into his father's office and finding him already gone. The official story is that Marcus Bellucci ordered the hit because your father was becoming unstable, Rebecca said. You were there. Is that what you believe happened? I believe Marcus made a choice he thought was necessary. Dominic's voice was measured. Whether he was right or wrong, that's not for me to say. But my father's letter suggests he knew something was coming, that he was trying to prevent it by stepping down voluntarily. Do you think Bellucci knew about the letters? No. If he had, things might have played out differently. Dominic met Rebecca's eyes. But that's speculation. All I know for certain is that my father died. I inherited his organization, and I've spent 2 decades trying to honor what he was trying to build at the end. Rebecca asked a few more questions, then finally turned off her recorder. Thank you. This has been incredibly helpful. When does your book come out? Next spring. I'll send you an advance copy if you'd like. I would. Dominic stood, helping Elena to her feet. And Rebecca? The letters. Can I keep them? She smiled. They were always yours. I made copies for my files. Outside the cafe, Dominic stood on the sidewalk looking lost. Elena wrapped her arms around him and held on while pedestrians flowed around them. You okay? She asked. I don't know. Maybe. He pulled back to look at her. I spent so long being angry at him, being afraid of becoming him, that I never let myself grieve him, just the idea of who I thought he was. You can grieve now, for who he actually was. Yeah. Dominic took a shaky breath. Let's go home. They drove back to the estate in silence, both processing. When they arrived, Adrian was waiting with news that Leo Salvatore had officially taken control in Chicago and was already implementing the agreed-upon territorial arrangements. The transition was going smoothly. Vincent was reportedly already in Rome, settling into his forced retirement. Everything was falling into place. The threats were neutralized. The organization was stable. The future was secure. So why did Elena still feel like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop? That night, lying in bed with Dominic's arms around her and her engagement ring catching moonlight from the window, she finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. Are you happy? Dominic shifted to look at her. What kind of question is that? A real one. Are you happy? With all of this? The organization, the responsibilities, the constant chess game? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know if happy is the right word. Satisfied, maybe. I've built something stable and relatively ethical given the constraints. I've protected people, maintained peace, done better than my father did. That's not the same as being happy. No, it's not. His hand traced patterns on her shoulder. But I have you now. That's new. That changes the equation. How? Because for the first time in my life, I have something to come home to that isn't just responsibility. I have a reason to want more than just survival and success. He kissed her forehead. You make me want to be happy, not just effective. Elena's throat tightened. What if we could have both? The life you've built and actual happiness. Is that what the house in the hills is supposed to be? Our hedge against misery? Maybe. Is that so wrong? No. Dominic pulled her closer. It's smart. It's necessary. Because you're right. This life grinds people down if they let it. Having somewhere to go that's separate from all of it, that's just ours. That might be what keeps us sane. They fell asleep tangled together, and for once Elena didn't dream of warehouses or kidnappings or violence. She dreamed of gardens and sunlight, and a future that looked nothing like the past. The next few weeks moved quickly. Wedding plans came together with surprising ease. Diane Chen took charge with the efficiency of a general marshaling troops, and Elena was grateful to let her. They settled on a ceremony at the Hilltop House, small and intimate, with a reception in the gardens. Patricia, the new house manager, proved to be everything Elena had hoped. Competent, professional, and completely uninterested in drama. She ran the estate with quiet efficiency, and the staff adapted to her leadership without complaint. Elena found herself with time to actually think about what she wanted. Not what Dominic needed, not what the household required, but what she personally wanted from life. She started small, reached out to some old contacts from her teaching days, explored what it would take to get certified, looked into volunteer opportunities with literacy programs, started writing again, something she'd loved in college but had abandoned under the weight of practical survival. Dominic noticed and encouraged it all. He'd carved out office space for her in the hilltop house, overlooking the gardens, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves waiting to be filled. "Build your own life," he'd said when showing it to her. "Not one that revolves around mine, one that's completely yours." It was the most generous thing anyone had ever given her. Not just space, but permission. Permission to want things, to pursue interests, to exist as more than just someone's partner or employee or caretaker. 2 weeks before the wedding, Elena was at the Hilltop house arranging books in her new office when her phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. "Hello, Miss Brooks? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the city police. I'm calling about the incident in Chicago involving Vincent Salvatore." Elena's stomach dropped. "What about it?" "Mr. Salvatore has filed a formal complaint alleging kidnapping and extortion. He's claiming that Mr. Moretti orchestrated your abduction as a pretext to force him out of business." The detective's voice was professional, neutral. "I need to ask you some questions about what happened that night. I already gave a statement to Chicago police." "I'm aware. But Mr. Salvatore's attorneys are pushing for a full investigation, and that requires us to verify the facts independently." A pause. "We can do this informally, or I can bring you in for formal questioning. Your choice." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the fragile peace of the past few weeks starting to crack. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon, if you're available. 2 o'clock at the station downtown." "I'll be there." She hung up and immediately called Dominic. He answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" She told him about the detective, about Vincent's complaint, about the investigation. Dominic's silence on the other end was heavy and dangerous. "That bastard," he finally said. "He agreed to retire quietly. This violates every term of our arrangement." "What do we do?" "You tell the truth. Exactly what happened. No embellishments. You were kidnapped, held against your will, and I rescued you. That's it." His voice was tight with controlled fury. "I'll handle Vincent." "Dominic, don't do anything. I'm not going to kill him if that's what you're worried about. But he needs to understand that breaking our agreement has consequences." The call ended, and Elena sat in her beautiful new office surrounded by books and potential, and felt the familiar weight of Dominic's world settling back over her shoulders. The next day, she met with Detective Chen at the station with Dominic's attorney present. She answered every question truthfully. Yes, she was kidnapped. Yes, she was held against her will. Yes, Dominic had come for her, and there had been violence involved in her rescue. "Mr. Salvatore claims this was orchestrated," Detective Chen said. "That Mr. Moretti arranged your kidnapping to justify his business actions against the Salvatore family." "That's insane." Elena met her eyes steadily. "Why would Dominic kidnap me, the woman he loves, and put me through trauma just to score business points? Vincent took me because he wanted leverage over Dominic, because he saw me as a weakness to exploit. But you're engaged to Mr. Moretti now. That happened after the kidnapping. Some might say the timing is convenient." "The timing is coincidental. We'd been together before Chicago. The engagement was—" Elena paused. "It was something we'd been moving toward regardless." Detective Chen asked more questions, took more notes, and finally closed her notebook. "Thank you for your cooperation. We'll be in touch if we need anything else." Elena left the station feeling drained and angry. Vincent had promised to stay gone, to leave them alone. Instead, he was thousands of miles away, making phone calls and filing complaints, trying to destroy them from a safe distance. She drove back to the estate and found Dominic in his office with Adrian and Marcus. All three men looked grim. "How did it go?" Dominic asked. "Fine. I told the truth." Elena sank into a chair. But Chen seemed skeptical, like she thought maybe Vincent's version made more sense. "She's doing her job, investigating all angles." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "But without evidence of orchestration, without any proof beyond Vincent's word, it won't go anywhere." "What about Thomas?" Elena asked. "The guard who betrayed us. What happened to him?" The silence that followed told her everything she needed to know. "He's not a problem anymore," Dominic said carefully. Elena should have pressed for details. should have demanded to know exactly what not a problem meant. But she was tired of asking questions she didn't really want answered. "What happens now?" she asked instead. "Now we wait to see if the investigation goes anywhere. In the meantime," Dominic's expression hardened. "Vincent is about to discover that retirement in Rome is going to be significantly less comfortable than he anticipated." "What does that mean?" "It means his assets are going to start freezing. His bank accounts will encounter unexpected difficulties. The villa he just purchased will have title problems that take months to resolve." Dominic's smile was cold. "Legal harassment. Nothing he can prove, nothing that directly connects to us, but enough to make his life miserable." "Is that necessary?" "Yes, because he needs to understand that breaking our agreement has consequences, that he doesn't get to hide in Europe and lob grenades at our life without blowback." Elena wanted to argue that they should be better than that revenge made them no different from Vincent, but she was tired of being the voice of morality in a world that didn't reward morality. "Fine," she said. "Do what you need to do. Just make sure it can't be traced back to us. I don't want to go through this again." The investigation dragged on for 2 weeks. Detective Chen called twice more with follow-up questions. Vincent's attorneys issued statements to the press about criminal organizations operating with impunity. The media picked up the story, and suddenly Elena found herself dodging reporters outside the estate. Through it all, Dominic remained calm and controlled. He had lawyers handling the legal aspects, publicists managing the media narrative, and associates making Vincent's life abroad increasingly complicated. Everything was compartmentalized, managed, controlled. But Elena could see the stress wearing on him. The way his jaw stayed tight, the way he worked later and later into the night. This was supposed to be over. Vincent was supposed to be handled. Instead, they were fighting a war on multiple fronts while trying to plan a wedding. 1 week before the ceremony, Elena found Dominic in his office at 2 a.m, still working. "Come to bed," she said from the doorway. "Soon. I just need to finish now." She crossed to his desk and closed his laptop. "Whatever you're working on can wait. You need sleep." "Elena, no. I'm done watching you grind yourself down over this." She pulled him to his feet. "Vincent wants you to be miserable. He wants to poison our happiness with stress and anxiety and constant vigilance. Don't give him that power." Dominic's resistance crumbled. He let her lead him upstairs, let her help him out of his clothes, let her hold him while the weight of everything finally broke through his careful control. "I'm so tired," he admitted into the darkness. "Tired of fighting, tired of managing crises, tired of everything having to be a strategic calculation." "Then stop. Just for tonight, just for right now, stop." Elena's hand traced soothing patterns on his back. "Let go of all of it and just be here with me." He did. For the first time since Chicago, maybe for the first time in years, Dominic let himself be vulnerable and human and imperfect. He cried into her shoulder, great wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and old. Elena held him through all of it, offering the kind of unconditional support that asked nothing in return. When he finally quieted, exhausted and spent, his voice was rough but lighter. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. And I don't deserve you either, but we get each other anyway." She kissed his forehead. "That's how love works. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing. I choose you. Every day, every version of you, I choose you. I choose you too, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and the next morning Dominic seemed different, lighter, like admitting weakness had somehow made him stronger. 3 days before the wedding, Detective Chen called with news. "We're closing the investigation," she said. "Vincent Salvatore's complaint lacks sufficient evidence to pursue charges. The case is being filed as resolved." Elena felt relief so intense it made her dizzy. "What changed?" "Let's just say Mr. Salvatore's credibility isn't what it used to be. Some financial irregularities came to light regarding his business practices. Hard to take accusations of criminal behavior seriously when you're under investigation yourself. Dominic's work undoubtedly, legal but effective, the kind of move that solved problems without technically breaking rules." "Thank you for letting me know," Elena said. "For what it's worth, I hope the wedding goes well. You seem like good people caught in a difficult situation." After she hung up, Elena went to find Dominic. He was in the gardens of the hilltop house, overseeing final preparations for the ceremony. String lights were being hung between trees. Chairs were being arranged in neat rows. The space was being transformed into something magical. "It's over," she told him. "Chen called. The investigation is closed." The smile that crossed his face was brilliant and genuine. Finally. Finally, we can just... He gestured at the garden, at the preparations, at the future spreading out before them. "We can just be happy. We can try, anyway." He pulled her close and kissed her, and for the first time in weeks, Elena felt like they might actually make it. Like maybe the universe was done testing them for a while. The wedding day arrived bright and clear, the kind of perfect weather that felt like a gift. Elena got ready in one of the upstairs bedrooms with Diane fussing over her dress and hair. It was a simple gown, elegant without being fussy, exactly what she'd wanted. "You look beautiful," Diane said, stepping back to admire her work. "Radiant, even." "I feel terrified." "That's normal. You're making a huge commitment to a complicated man with a complicated life." Diane squeezed her hand. "But if anyone can handle it, it's you." Downstairs, the garden was full of people. Not many, maybe 30 total, but the ones who mattered. Adrian stood with Dominic at the front, both men in perfectly tailored suits. Maria and several other staff members had come, which touched Elena more than she'd expected. Richard Chen was there with a few of Dominic's business associates who'd proven themselves trustworthy. The ceremony itself was brief. No religious elements, just simple vows about partnership and commitment and choosing each other every day. Elena's voice shook when she spoke her vows, but Dominic's hands on hers were steady. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss your bride," Dominic did so with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. This moment, this commitment, it was everything they'd fought for, everything they'd survived to reach. The reception was casual and warm. Someone had strung more lights as the sun set, and music played from speakers hidden in the garden. People ate and drank and celebrated, and for once there were no crises, no threats, no complications, just happiness, simple and earned and real. Late in the evening, Elena found herself standing with Adrian near the edge of the garden. He'd been quiet most of the night, watching with a small smile that didn't quite hide the melancholy underneath. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking about how different things could have been." "Adrian, I'm fine, really." He turned to face her fully. "I meant what I said before. I wanted you to be happy, and you are. Anyone can see that. So I'm happy too. You'll find someone who sees you the way you deserve to be seen. Maybe, but right now I'm just glad you found what you were looking for." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," Elena echoed. Across the garden, she caught Dominic's eye. He smiled and started making his way toward her, and Elena felt her heart swell with something that felt like contentment. This was it. This was the life she'd chosen. Complicated and imperfect and occasionally terrifying, but hers. Theirs. That night, after all the guests had left and the caterers had cleaned up, Dominic and Elena stood on the balcony of the master bedroom, looking out over the garden. "We did it," he said softly. "We actually made it here." "Did you doubt we would?" "Every day. Every single day I thought something would go wrong, some crisis would derail us, some part of my world would destroy what we were building." He pulled her close. "But you stayed. Through kidnappings and investigations and Vincent and everything else, you stayed. Where else would I go? You're my home now." Dominic kissed the top of her head. "I have something to show you. One more surprise." He led her back inside into his office, where he pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. Inside were documents, legal papers, forms, official-looking seals. "What is this?" Elena asked. "I told you once that I'd spent 20 years trying to honor what my father was trying to build. Well, I've decided it's time to finish what he started." Dominic's expression was serious but calm. "I'm stepping back, not completely. I'll still be involved in major decisions, still maintain oversight, but I'm handing daily operations over to a council of senior members. Adrian, Marcus, 3 others who've proven themselves trustworthy." Elena's breath caught. "You're serious?" "Completely. I don't want to be 60 years old and realize I spent my entire life managing an organization instead of living. I want time with you. I want to build the life we talked about, and I can't do that if I'm buried in business 24/7. "When does this happen?" It's already happening. I've been transitioning things for the past 2 weeks. By the end of the month, the new structure will be fully in place. He set the folder aside and took both her hands. My father told me not to let this life cost me the things that matter. I'm finally taking that advice. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. I didn't ask you to do this. I know. I'm doing it anyway. Because you were right. I want to be happy. Not just effective or successful or powerful. Happy. And that means making space for things that have nothing to do with the organization. They kissed, and it tasted like promise and possibility and all the futures they'd get to build together now that they weren't constantly fighting fires. The next few months proved Dominic's decision was the right one. The council handled operations smoothly, the organization stayed stable, and Dominic transformed from someone who lived at his desk to someone who actually had hobbies and interests beyond work. He and Elena spent weeks at the Hilltop House, establishing routines and rituals, morning coffee on the balcony, evening walks through the gardens, dinners where they talked about books and ideas instead of territories and negotiations. Elena started teaching again, taking a position at a community center, helping adults learn to read. It was fulfilling in a way her previous work never had been. Direct impact, immediate results, people whose lives changed because of something she did. Dominic joined the board of a nonprofit that helped at-risk youth, channeling his strategic mind toward actually helping people instead of just managing power. He was good at it, surprisingly good, and Elena watched him discover parts of himself that had been buried under years of obligation. They visited the estate regularly. It was still home in many ways, but it no longer defined their entire existence. Patricia ran things beautifully, and the staff adapted to the new normal without complaint. Vincent's harassment eventually stopped. His assets remained frozen, his life remained complicated, and eventually he gave up trying to cause problems from abroad. The last they heard, he'd moved to Southeast Asia and was staying quiet. 6 months after the wedding, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She told Dominic over breakfast on the balcony, watching the sunrise paint the gardens gold. He went completely still, coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. "You're sure?" he finally asked. 3 tests, sure, and nausea that could wake the dead. She managed a nervous smile. "I know we didn't plan this. I know it's soon and complicated and—" Dominic set down his cup and pulled her into his lap, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "We're having a baby," he said into her hair, and his voice was thick with emotion. "We're actually having a baby." "You're happy?" Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were bright. Terrified, overwhelmed, completely unprepared, but happy, so happy. They sat there holding each other while the sun finished rising, both processing the magnitude of what this meant. A child. A whole new person who would inherit their complicated legacy and hopefully transcend it. "I want them to have a better life than I did," Dominic said quietly. "I want them to have choices, to never feel trapped by obligation or legacy or what their family name requires. They will. We'll make sure of it." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Elena continued teaching until the 3rd trimester, then switched to developing curriculum from home. Dominic became obsessively focused on preparing, reading parenting books, baby-proofing both houses, setting up college funds before the child was even born. In her 7th month, Elena woke in the middle of the night to find Dominic sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight she could see the vulnerability on his face. "What if I'm not good at this? Being a father? What if I mess them up the way my father messed me up?" Elena hauled herself out of bed, not easy at 7 months pregnant, and went to him. "Your father didn't mess you up. He gave you a complicated legacy and died before he could fix his mistakes. That's not the same thing. But what if I make different mistakes? What if I'm too controlling or too distant or too focused on keeping them safe that I forget to let them live? Then we'll figure it out together, make adjustments, apologize when we screw up." She took his hand and placed it on her belly, where their child was currently doing gymnastics. "We're not going to be perfect parents, but we're going to be present ones. That's what matters." Dominic's hand stayed on her belly, feeling the movements of their child. "I'm going to love them so much. I already do." "Me too." Their daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday in April, arriving 3 weeks early and absolutely furious about it. She came out screaming and didn't stop for what felt like hours. But when the nurses finally placed her in Elena's arms, swaddled and still protesting, Elena felt something in her chest crack wide open. This was love. Not the complicated, hard-won love she had with Dominic, but something simpler and fiercer, instantaneous and absolute. "She's perfect," Dominic said from beside her, his voice rough with tears. "Look at her. She's absolutely perfect." They named her Sophia, after Dominic's mother. Sophia Marie Moretti, 7 pounds of determination and volume. The first few months were chaos. Neither of them had any idea what they were doing, and Sophia made sure they knew it. She was colicky and demanding and slept in increments of 45 minutes if they were lucky. Elena and Dominic took turns walking her around the house at 3 in the morning, both of them exhausted and overwhelmed and completely in love. "I thought running an organization was hard," Dominic said one night, bouncing Sophia while she screamed. "This is a whole different level. At least negotiations don't require constant diaper changes," Elena said from where she was collapsed on the couch. "I'd take a hostile negotiation over whatever this rash situation is any day." But despite the chaos, despite the exhaustion, they were happy. Genuinely, completely happy, in a way that had nothing to do with power or success or winning. This was different. This was about building something that would outlast them, creating a legacy that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with love. On Sophia's first birthday, they threw a small party at the Hilltop house. Family and friends gathered to watch her destroy her first cake with enthusiastic incompetence. Adrian came and brought a gift that played music. Of course he did. Maria and several other staff members came bearing handmade items and advice. Diane and Richard drove up from the city with their grandchildren. Looking around at all these people who'd become family in various ways, Elena felt overwhelming gratitude. Not for the perfect life. They didn't have that and never would. But for this life. Messy and complicated and occasionally terrifying, but fundamentally good. That night, after everyone had left and Sophia was finally asleep, Elena and Dominic stood in their daughter's nursery watching her breathe. "Do you ever miss it?" Elena asked quietly. "The old life? Being in control of everything? Sometimes. There are moments when something happens in the organization and I want to step in, take over, handle it myself." Dominic's arm went around her waist. "But then I come home to you and Sophia, and I remember why I stepped back. This is better. This matters more. We did good, didn't we? Despite everything, we did incredible. We survived kidnappings and investigations and Vincent and our own doubts. We built something real." He pulled her closer. "And we're still building it, every day." Elena leaned into him and watched their daughter sleep, this small, perfect person they'd created together. Sophia would grow up knowing her father not as the fearsome head of an organization, but as the man who read her bedtime stories and made ridiculous faces to make her laugh. She'd know her mother not as invisible staff or someone's appendage, but as a teacher and writer with her own dreams and accomplishments. She'd grow up with choices, with freedom, with the knowledge that she was loved completely and without condition. That was the legacy that mattered, not power or territory or success, but love. The kind of love that persisted through difficulty. The kind that chose to stay when leaving would be easier. The kind that built futures instead of just protecting presents. Years later, when Sophia was 5 and asking endless questions about everything, she'd want to know how her parents met. Elena and Dominic would look at each other, silently deciding how much truth to share with a kindergartner. "I worked for your father," Elena would say, "managing his house. And one day I realized I was in love with her," Dominic would add. "So I asked her to dinner. Did she say yes?" Eventually, after some complications. It was the simplified version, sanitized for young ears. Someday, when Sophia was older, they'd tell her the real story. About the dinner that wasn't theirs, about Adrian's intervention, about Vincent and Chicago and the investigation, about choosing love in the middle of chaos and building a life out of the wreckage of what could have destroyed them. But for now, the simple version was enough. 2 people who fell in love, overcame obstacles, and built a family. The specifics would come later. The complications, the context, the full messy truth of how love actually works in the real world, where it's not just about feelings, but about choice and commitment and showing up even when it's hard. For now, sitting in their garden with Sophia playing nearby and the future stretching bright and uncertain before them, Elena and Dominic simply existed in the present, grateful for what they'd survived, hopeful for what came next, together in all the ways that mattered. And if Elena sometimes woke in the night and reached for Dominic, needing the solid reality of him to prove this wasn't a dream, he was always there, reaching back, choosing her again and again and again, because that was love. Not the fairy tale version where everything was easy and perfect, but the real version. The one that fought for itself, that refused to give up, that transformed two imperfect people into something better together than they'd ever been apart. That was the story worth telling, the one worth living. And as the sun set over their garden and Sophia ran to her parents with grass-stained knees and a handful of flowers, Elena thought maybe they'd figured something out that took most people a lifetime to learn. That love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth fighting for. And then doing the work, every single day, to build something that could weather any storm. They'd weathered plenty, and they'd weather whatever came next. Together, always together. That was enough. That was everything.